When a mafia king demands payment in blood or marriage, which would you choose? At 2:47 a.m., Serafina Vale's world shattered. Two men in black coats, a father's betrayal worth $12 million. And Dominic Varelli, the most dangerous man on the East Coast, offering her a deal she couldn't refuse: marry him for 1 year or watch her father disappear forever. No love, no escape, just survival inside a gilded cage where enemies lurk in every shadow. This is the story of a contract that became a war and a marriage that defied an empire. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And hit that like button if you're ready for the ride. The rain came down like nails against the cracked window of Serafina Vale's studio apartment, each drop hammering a rhythm that matched the panic clawing up her throat. She'd been staring at the water-stained ceiling for 3 hours, too wired to sleep, when the knock came. Not a knock, really. More like a command. 3 sharp raps that didn't ask permission. Her feet hit the cold floor before her brain caught up. The clock on the microwave blinked 2:47 a.m. in angry red digits. Nobody knocked at 2:47 unless something was bleeding or burning or broken beyond repair. She didn't bother with the peephole. The door opened to reveal 2 men who looked like they'd been carved from the same block of granite. Charcoal coats buttoned tight, faces blank as tombstones. Behind them, through the failing hallway light, she could make out the silhouettes of black sedans idling in the street below, exhaust rising like funeral smoke. Serafina Vale. The taller one didn't phrase it as a question. Her fingers tightened on the doorframe. Who's asking? Your father made some poor choices. We're here to discuss repayment options. The floor seemed to tilt beneath her bare feet. Her father. Of course it was about him. It was always about him. The gambling debts, the loan sharks, the promises that evaporated like morning fog. But this felt different. These men didn't have the desperate edge of street-level collectors. They had the kind of calm that came from knowing they held all the cards, all the guns, and all the time in the world. I don't know where he is, she said, hating how small her voice sounded. We do. The second man stepped forward, and she caught the glint of something metallic beneath his coat. Not a threat, just a fact. Get dressed, you're coming with us. And if I say no, then your father's body washes up in the harbor by sunrise, and we come back for you anyway. He said it like he was reading a grocery list. 5 minutes, Miss Vale. Wear something appropriate. The door closed before she could respond, leaving her standing in the dark with her pulse hammering in her ears. Her phone sat on the kitchen counter, screen black and useless. She could call 911, but what would she say? 2 well-dressed men politely invited me for a ride? The cops wouldn't arrive in time, and even if they did, men like that didn't leave evidence. They left messages. She yanked on jeans, a sweater, boots. Her hands shook as she tied the laces. In the mirror above the dresser, her reflection looked pale and brittle, 26 years old and already drowning in someone else's wreckage. Her father had been promising to get clean, get straight, get better for as long as she could remember. And she'd been stupid enough to believe him every single time. The ride happened in silence. She sat in the back of the sedan between the 2 granite men while rain hammered the roof and the city blurred past in streaks of neon and shadow. They drove north along the coast highway, away from the cramped streets of downtown and into territory she'd only seen in magazine spreads. Gated estates, manicured lawns, the kind of wealth that didn't need to advertise itself. When the car finally stopped, she was staring up at iron gates tall enough to block out the sky. Beyond them, a mansion sprawled across the cliffs like something out of a Gothic nightmare, all sharp angles and dark stone, windows glowing with warm light that somehow made the place feel colder. The Ashcroft Estate. She'd heard the name whispered in dive bars and late-night diners, always with a particular kind of reverence that bordered on fear. This was where the money lived. The old money. The dangerous money. The gate swung open without a sound. Inside, the house was all polished marble and shadowed corners, the kind of place where your footsteps echoed even when you tried to walk quietly. A woman in a crisp black suit. Housekeeper? Assistant? Executioner? Led her through hallways lined with oil paintings of stern-faced men who all seemed to be judging her for crimes she hadn't committed yet. They stopped in front of a massive wooden door. The woman knocked once, then pushed it open and stepped aside. "Miss Vale," she said, and it sounded like a dismissal. Serafina stepped inside and the door clicked shut behind her with the finality of a vault ceiling. The room was a study, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a fireplace crackling with flames that threw dancing shadows across Persian rugs, leather chairs that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. And behind a desk that looked like it had witnessed the signing of international treaties sat a man who made every instinct in her body scream run. Dominic Varelli didn't look like a monster. That was the first thought that sliced through her panic. He looked like money and control wrapped in expensive fabric. Tailored suit, dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on magazine covers, hands folded on the desk with the patience of someone who'd never had to wait for anything in his life. But it was his eyes that pinned her in place. Silver gray and cold enough to frost glass, scanning her with the kind of assessment usually reserved for livestock at auction. He didn't stand, didn't smile, just watched her with that unnerving stillness while the fire popped and hissed. Sit. His voice was quiet, controlled, somehow worse than shouting. She didn't move. Where's my father? Safe, for now. He gestured toward one of the leather chairs. Sit down, Miss Vale. We have business to discuss, and I don't enjoy repeating myself. Her legs carried her forward before her brain could override them. She sank into the chair, feeling it swallow her, too soft and too deep. Dominic leaned back, fingers steepled beneath his chin, and studied her like she was a particularly interesting problem that needed solving. Your father, he said slowly, owes me $12 million. The number hit her like a fist to the stomach. 12 million. She'd known it was bad. She'd always known it was bad. But this was apocalyptic. This was burn your life to the ground and salt the earth bad. I don't have that kind of money. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. I work at a diner. I barely make rent. I know exactly what you make, Miss Vale. I know where you work, where you bank, what you had for breakfast yesterday morning. He said it without malice, just stating facts. I also know your father has been very creative in his attempts to avoid repayment. He's stolen from 3 of my business partners, forged documents to access funds that weren't his, and implicated several of my associates in federal investigations. That's not my fault. No. He tilted his head slightly. But it is your problem. The fire crackled. Outside the windows, rain lashed against the glass like it was trying to break in. Serafina's fingernails dug into the leather armrests. So what happens now? She asked. You kill him? Kill me? Make us both disappear? I'm considering it. He said it so casually she almost didn't register the threat. But there's an alternative, one that benefits us both and resolves this situation without unnecessary bloodshed. I'm listening. Dominic stood, moving to the window with the kind of fluid grace that made her think of apex predators. He stared out at the rain-swept grounds, hands clasped behind his back. The Varelli family operates according to certain traditions, he said. Old rules that govern succession, inheritance, and debt resolution. One of those rules states that financial obligations between families can be settled through matrimonial alliance. It took her 3 full seconds to process what he was saying. When she did, the laugh that burst out of her was sharp enough to cut. You want me to marry you? For 1 year. He turned back to face her, expression unchanged. A contractual arrangement. You live here as my wife, fulfill certain public obligations, and at the end of 12 months, the marriage is dissolved and your father's debt is considered paid in full. That's insane. That's the offer. She stood up, pacing to the fireplace because sitting still felt impossible. Her mind was racing, tripping over itself, trying to find the angle, the trap, the razor blade hidden in the apple. Why? She demanded. Why me? Why this? You could just take the money or whatever it is people like you do when someone crosses you. Because your father doesn't have the money. He spent it, gambled it, lost it in investments that don't exist. Dominic's voice remained maddeningly level. Killing him accomplishes nothing except sending a message. Killing you would be equally pointless. But a marriage, he gestured vaguely, that serves multiple purposes. It satisfies the old guard in my organization who still value tradition. It demonstrates mercy, which is good for my reputation. And it gives your father a reason to cooperate with federal authorities rather than continue making problems for everyone involved. You're trading me like I'm property. I'm offering you a choice. He moved closer, and she forced herself not to step back. Option 1. Your father vanishes tonight, and you spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder wondering when someone decides to collect interest on his mistakes. Option 2. You sign a contract, spend a year living in more comfort than you've ever known, and walk away free when it's over with your father still breathing. Some choice. It's more than most people get. She wanted to scream, wanted to throw something at that perfectly calm face, wanted to run out into the rain and keep running until her lungs gave out. But the cold calculation in his eyes told her she wouldn't make it past the gates, and even if she did, there was nowhere to run to. Men like Dominic Varelli didn't make offers they weren't prepared to enforce. What happens during the year? The question tasted like ash. What exactly does fulfilling obligations mean? You attend events as my wife, charity galas, business dinners, family functions. You live in the estate but maintain your own quarters. You don't speak to the press without approval. You don't leave the grounds without security. He paused. And you don't contact your father unless I permit it. Sounds like prison. Sounds like survival. The logs in the fireplace shifted, sending up a shower of sparks. Serafina closed her eyes, trying to think past the panic, past the anger, past the sick certainty that her life had just been sold out from under her by a man who'd never cared about anyone but himself. I want to see him, she said finally. My father. Before I agree to anything. No. Then we don't have a deal. Dominic's jaw tightened, the first crack in his composure. You're not in a position to negotiate. Neither are you. She forced herself to hold his gaze. You need this marriage for your traditions, your reputation, whatever political game you're playing, which means you need me to say yes. So I want to see my father. I want to hear from his own mouth that he's alive and that this is what he wants me to do. The silence stretched so long she thought he might call for the men in charcoal coats to drag her back to the car. But then Dominic pulled out his phone, typed something, and pocketed it again. You have 5 minutes, he said, and if you try anything stupid, the deal is off and we proceed with option 1. Her father looked smaller than she remembered. That was the first thing that hit her when they brought him into the room. How diminished he seemed, shoulders hunched, eyes darting around like a cornered animal. His clothes were wrinkled, his stubble overgrown, and when he saw her, his face crumpled with something that might have been relief or guilt or both. Sarah, his voice cracked. Baby, I'm so sorry. Save it. The words came out harder than she intended. Just tell me the truth. Did you steal from them? He flinched. It wasn't supposed to go like this. I had a plan. I swear I was going to... Did you steal? Yes. Barely a whisper. But I was going to pay it back. I just needed time. $12 million. She said each word slowly, watching him flinch with every syllable. You stole $12 million from the Varelli family and thought what? That they'd just forget about it? I had connections, people who said they could help. Those people are dead, Mr. Vale. Dominic's voice cut through the room like a blade. He'd been standing by the door, so still she'd almost forgotten he was there. 3 of them, to be precise. Federal raids last month. Your connections were federal informants, and your cooperation led investigators directly to several of my business operations. Her father's face went gray. I didn't know. You didn't care. Dominic moved forward, and her father actually cowered. You were so busy trying to save yourself that you never considered the consequences. Now your daughter's paying your debts because you're too cowardly to face them yourself. Don't talk to him like that, Serafina heard herself say, which was stupid because she wanted to say worse things, wanted to scream at the pathetic man who dragged her into this nightmare. Dominic's gaze slid to her, something unreadable flickering in those cold eyes. You're defending him. I'm defending my right to be angry at him myself. She turned back to her father. Did they hurt you? No, they've been asking questions, trying to figure out where I hid. He stopped, glancing nervously at Dominic. Where you hid the money you didn't actually steal, Dominic finished. We know you spent it, Mr. Vale. The question is whether you spent it gambling or whether you gave it to the Eastern Syndicate as payment for information about my operations. The Eastern Syndicate. Even Serafina had heard that name, whispered in the same tones people used for cancer or plague. If her father had gotten involved with them, I didn't, her father said, but his voice shook. I swear on your mother's grave, Sarah, I would never... Don't! The word came out sharp enough to cut. Don't you dare bring her into this. Her mother had died when Serafina was 16, and her father had been spiraling ever since, first the gambling, then the loans, then the increasingly desperate schemes that never quite worked out. She'd spent a decade cleaning up his messes, and now here she was, standing in a mansion owned by a crime lord, being asked to sell her life for another year of his survival. Time's up, Dominic said. Miss Vale, I need your answer. She looked at her father, really looked at him, and saw the truth written in every line of his face. He was terrified. Not for her, but for himself. He'd known what he was asking when he stole that money. He'd known the consequences would land on someone else, and he'd done it anyway. And she was going to save him. Again. Because that's what she'd always done. Because walking away would mean spending the rest of her life wondering what if. Because despite everything, despite the anger and betrayal and bone-deep exhaustion, he was still her father. I want the contract in writing, she said, not looking at Dominic. Every detail. What you expect from me, what I get in return, what happens at the end of the year. I want a lawyer to review it. My lawyer, not yours. And I want insurance that if anything happens to me, my father's debt is still cleared. Done. And I want a phone. Access to the outside world. I'm not going to be your prisoner. Within reason. Those are my terms. Dominic studied her with an expression she couldn't read. You're smarter than your father gives you credit for. That's not saying much. She finally turned to face him fully. When do we start? The ceremony is in 3 days. My lawyers will have the contract ready tomorrow morning. He moved to the door, opened it. The men in charcoal coats were waiting outside. Take Mr. Vale back to the guest quarters. Ensure he has everything he needs. Wait, her father called out as they led him away. Sarah, please, you have to understand. But she'd already stopped listening. The door closed, and it was just her and Dominic in the vast study, the fire crackling between them like something alive and hungry. You can still walk away, Dominic said quietly. Right now. Out the door. Back to your life. I won't stop you. And my father? Faces the consequences of his choices. She should walk away. Every rational cell in her body was screaming at her to run, but rationality had left the building the moment those men knocked on her door, and all she had left was the hollow certainty that this was her life now, making impossible choices in the dark while men in expensive suits decided her fate. 3 days, she said. I'll need 3 days to get my affairs in order. You'll stay here. I'll send people to collect your belongings. That wasn't a request. Something almost like respect flickered across his face. Fine, but you'll have security with you at all times. Non-negotiable. Then I guess we have a deal. He extended his hand. She stared at it for a long moment. Smooth skin, no rings, fingers that looked like they'd never done manual labor in their life. Hands that probably signed death warrants with the same ease as business contracts. She shook it anyway. His grip was firm, warm, utterly at odds with the ice in his eyes. Welcome to the family, Miss Vale. The ceremony happened in a private chapel on the estate grounds that looked like it hadn't seen a wedding in decades. Rain hammered against the stained glass windows, turning the colored light into something fractured and wrong. There were no guests, no music, no flowers. Just Dominic in a black suit, Serafina in a white dress she'd found hanging in her temporary quarters that morning. Designer label, perfect fit, clearly purchased specifically for this moment, and a stern-faced officiant who read through the vows like he was dictating a grocery list. Do you, Dominic Varelli, take this woman? I do. No hesitation, no emotion, like he was agreeing to a merger. And do you, Serafina Vale? I do. The words scraped her throat raw. The ring was white gold, heavy enough to drag her hand down. It caught the fractured light from the windows and threw rainbows across the chapel floor that looked too cheerful for what was essentially a financial transaction dressed in ceremonial clothing. You may kiss the bride. Dominic leaned in. For a second, she thought he might actually do it, close that last inch, make it real in some terrible way. But he just brushed his lips against her forehead, clinical and brief, like a doctor checking for fever. Welcome home, wife, he murmured, quiet enough that only she could hear. Then he stepped back, shook the officiant's hand, and walked out of the chapel without looking back. Serafina stood alone in the colored light, rain drumming overhead, and tried to remember how to breathe. The reception was just as empty as the ceremony. They ate dinner in a formal dining room that could have seated 50 people. Her at one end of a table long enough to dock a boat, Dominic at the other, so much polished wood between them they might as well have been in different time zones. Staff glided in and out with courses she barely tasted, and the only sound was silverware scraping against china and the rain that never seemed to stop. "You should eat something," Dominic said finally, his voice carrying across the distance. "The kitchen prepared this specifically for you." "I'm not hungry." "You need to maintain your strength. The next few weeks will be demanding. Because playing dress-up at your parties is so exhausting." He set down his fork with deliberate precision. "You're angry. You're perceptive. This was your choice." This was the least terrible option in a series of terrible options. She pushed back from the table, the chair scraping loud enough to make a passing servant flinch. "That's not the same thing as choice. Your father—" "Don't." She stood, hands flat on the table. "Don't talk about him. Don't justify this. We both know exactly what this is." Dominic watched her with that unreadable expression, and for a second she thought she saw something crack beneath the surface, some flicker of humanity struggling against whatever ice had taken root in him. But then it was gone, and he was back to being the marble statue sitting across an ocean of polished wood. "Your quarters are in the east wing," he said. "Third floor, last door on the right. You'll find everything you need already there. If you require anything else, inform the staff." "And where do you sleep?" "That's not your concern. We're married. We have a contract." He stood as well, buttoning his jacket with movements so precise they looked rehearsed. "The terms of which state that this is a legal arrangement for public appearances and debt resolution. Nothing more." "Right." She laughed, sharp and bitter. "Nothing more. Just a year of my life sold to pay for my father's mistakes. 18 months at most. If you maintain the appearance properly and fulfill your obligations, I may be able to accelerate the timeline." "How generous." "Miss Vale, it's Mrs. Varelli now, isn't it?" She said it like a curse. "That's the whole point of this circus." He crossed to her side of the table, moving with that predator grace, until he was close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive that probably cost more than she used to make in a month. Up close, she could see the faint scar cutting through his left eyebrow, the shadows under his eyes that suggested he slept about as well as she did. "You don't have to like me," he said quietly. "You don't have to respect me, but you do have to survive this, and survival means following the rules. Your rules. The only rules that matter in this house." They stood there in the cavernous dining room, rain hammering the windows, too close and too far apart all at once. Serafina wanted to hit him, wanted to scream, wanted to do anything that might crack that perfect control. Instead, she stepped back, putting distance between them like it might somehow make this whole nightmare less real. "I'm going to bed," she said, "or to my quarters, or whatever you want to call the gilded cage I'm supposed to sleep in." Serafina, but she was already walking away, her heels clicking against marble floors, through hallways lined with portraits of dead people who all seemed to be looking down at her with the same expression Dominic wore, cold, calculating, and utterly devoid of mercy. She found her quarters exactly where he'd said they'd be. The room was larger than her entire previous apartment, all silk and cream and subtle luxury that probably cost a fortune to look so effortlessly simple. A four-poster bed dominated one wall, windows overlooking the rain-soaked grounds took up another, and a door she assumed led to a bathroom stood ajar, revealing marble and gold fixtures. Her belongings, what little she'd had, were already unpacked, clothes hanging in a walk-in closet that made her old wardrobe look like doll clothes, toiletries arranged on pristine counters, even her books, rescued from milk crates and lined up on built-in shelves like they'd always belonged there. Serafina sank onto the bed and finally let herself break. The sobs came hard and fast, ripping through her chest, because this was real now. The contract was signed. The ring was on her finger. She'd married a man she didn't know to save a father who'd never once put her first, and she was going to spend the next year pretending this was normal while living in a house that felt more like a mausoleum than a home. She cried until her throat was raw and her eyes burned and there was nothing left but hollow exhaustion. Then she lay back on sheets softer than clouds and stared at the ceiling, listening to rain drum against glass. Somewhere in this massive house, Dominic Varelli was probably sitting in his study, signing papers, or planning whatever crime lords planned when they weren't busy ruining people's lives. And somewhere in the guest quarters, her father was sleeping soundly, debt cleared, conscience probably just as clean as it had always been. She'd saved him, again, and lost herself in the process. The thought was still circling through her head when exhaustion finally dragged her under. Her last conscious awareness was of the rain, relentless and cold, and the weight of the ring on her finger that felt less like jewelry and more like a shackle. She woke to darkness and the certainty that something was wrong. The room was too quiet. The rain had stopped. And there were voices in the hallway, low, urgent, the kind of conversation that happens in the middle of the night when things are going bad fast. Serafina slid out of bed, pulled on a robe, and cracked open her door. Two men in suits, not the ones who'd collected her, but cut from the same stone, stood a few feet away, phones pressed to their ears, speaking in tense Italian she couldn't quite follow. But she caught certain words. Raid, federal, compromised. One of them noticed her, said something sharp to his companion, and both went silent. "What's going on?" she asked. "Nothing that concerns you, Mrs. Varelli. Go back to bed."
"It's 3 a.m, and you're having a crisis meeting outside my bedroom. That seems like it concerns me." The taller one's jaw tightened. "Mr. Varelli will brief you if necessary. Until then what? I'm supposed to sit in my room like a good little prisoner while the house falls apart?"
"The house is not—" He stopped, phone buzzing again. He answered it, listened, and his face went carefully blank. When he hung up, he looked at his companion. "Get her to the safe room, now." "What? No, I want to know what's—" "Federal agents are at the gate, Mrs. Varelli." His voice had gone flat, professional. "They have a warrant to search the premises and question everyone in the household. Mr. Varelli's orders are to secure you immediately before they breach the property."
The world tilted sideways. Federal agents, a warrant, less than 12 hours after she'd signed her life away. "Where's my father?" The question came out before she could stop it. The men exchanged a look. "Where is he?" Serafina demanded. "We don't know," the tall one admitted. "His room is empty. He's not on the grounds."
And that's when she understood. Her father hadn't just stolen money from the Varelli family. He'd given federal authorities everything they needed to tear Dominic's empire apart. And he'd disappeared the moment the ink dried on her contract, leaving her standing in the wreckage with a ring on her finger and absolutely nowhere to run. The man was already pulling her down the hallway, his partner speaking rapidly into his phone. Somewhere below, she could hear doors slamming, footsteps echoing, the organized chaos of a fortress preparing for siege. Serafina stumbled along in bare feet, robe clutched closed, and thought about her father's face during that 5-minute meeting. The guilt, the fear, the way he couldn't quite meet her eyes. He'd known. He'd known the raid was coming, and he'd let her marry Dominic anyway, using her as cover for his own escape. She'd saved him, and he'd sold her out completely. The safe room turned out to be a reinforced bunker buried beneath the wine cellar, accessible only through a hidden panel behind a rack of bottles that probably cost more than most people's cars. The walls were concrete thick enough to survive a bombing, lined with monitors showing every angle of the estate grounds in grainy black and white. Serafina stood in the center of the cramped space, barefoot and shivering in her silk robe, watching federal agents swarm through the front gates like ants invading a picnic. Dominic was already there when they'd shoved her inside, standing in front of the monitors with his jacket off and shirt sleeves rolled up, phone pressed to his ear while he spoke in rapid-fire Italian that sounded like he was orchestrating a war. He didn't acknowledge her entrance, didn't even glance her direction, just kept talking, kept watching the screens, kept being the absolute center of control while chaos erupted above them. "How many?" he asked in English, switching languages mid-conversation. The voice on the other end was tinny but clear. 23 agents, 8 vehicles. They're spreading through the main house now. They have warrants for financial records, communications, and witness testimony. Stall them. Every second counts." He hung up, made another call. "Marco, lock down the East Wing office. Everything that isn't nailed down goes into the incinerator. You have 4 minutes before they breach that corridor." Serafina found her voice. "You're destroying evidence." "I'm protecting my family." He still hadn't looked at her. "From what? The consequences of being criminals?" That got his attention. He lowered the phone, turned slowly, and the expression on his face was so cold it could have flash frozen the room. "Careful, wife. You're standing in my house, wearing my ring, and your father is the reason federal agents are currently tearing apart everything I've built." My father who you let walk right out of here. Your father who I had under guard. His voice dropped to something dangerous. Until someone deactivated the security system in the guest wing and unlocked his door from the inside, which means I have a traitor in my own house and federal coordination that suggests this has been planned for months. The implication hit her like cold water. You think I think timing is everything, Miss Vale. You show up, sign a contract, and 12 hours later my entire operation is compromised? That's not coincidence. Are you insane? I didn't even want to be here. And yet here you are, perfectly positioned to play the innocent victim, while federal agents execute a warrant that requires inside information to obtain. He moved closer, and she could see the rage simmering beneath that controlled exterior. So let me be very clear. If I find out you had anything to do with this, you'll what? Kill me? Add another body to whatever pile you've already built? I'll make sure you wish I had. The door slammed open and a woman burst in, mid-30s, dark hair pulled back severe enough to hurt, wearing tactical gear and moving like a coiled spring. She took one look at Serafina and her hand dropped to the gun at her hip. Who the hell is this? My wife, Dominic said, voice flat. The woman's eyes widened fractionally. You got married? When? Why wasn't I informed? 3 days ago. And you're being informed now, Celeste. 3 days. Celeste looked between them, and Serafina saw the exact moment she connected the dots. This is about the Vale debt. You married the daughter to settle the father's… Jesus Christ, Dominic, what were you thinking? I was thinking tradition matters to the old guard, and you needed a convenient scapegoat when this whole thing collapsed. Celeste turned to Serafina. Let me guess. Your father promised to cooperate if Big Brother here agreed to protect you, and the moment the ceremony was over, Daddy disappeared and the feds showed up? Serafina's throat felt too tight to answer. Celeste laughed, sharp and bitter. That's almost impressive, using his own daughter as cover. She looked at Dominic. How much did we lose? Everything in the main office. Financial records, account access, 3 years of communications. Marco's burning what he can, but they're moving fast. The offshore accounts? Secure. For now. But if they have inside information, then someone talked, and we need to find out who before they roll the entire network. Celeste finally moved her hand away from her gun. The girl stays locked down here until we know what we're dealing with. I have a name, Serafina said. I'm sure you do, honey. I'm also sure you're either the most unlucky person in Boston or a federal informant who's about to get herself killed. Either way, you don't leave this room until… The lights flickered. Once, twice. Then the monitors went black. Dominic's face didn't change, but something in his posture shifted, became hyper-alert. Backup generator should have kicked in. Unless someone cut those too. Celeste pulled her weapon, moved to the door. We need to move. Now. Where? Anywhere but a concrete box with one exit. She yanked the door open, checked the corridor beyond. Clear. Let's go. Dominic grabbed Serafina's wrist, his grip iron tight. Stay close. Don't speak. Don't run. If I tell you to do something, you do it without question. I'm not… Do you understand? His eyes were chips of ice in the emergency lighting that had finally kicked in, casting everything in red. This isn't a negotiation. People are about to die tonight, and I need to know you won't be one of them because you decided to be stubborn. She nodded because what else could she do? Her wrist hurt where he was holding it, but she didn't pull away. Whatever was happening above them was bigger than her anger, bigger than the betrayal, bigger than the surreal nightmare of being locked in a bunker with a crime lord and his sister while federal agents tore apart their fortress. They moved through corridors Serafina didn't know existed. Maintenance tunnels, servant passages, secret arteries running through the mansion's bones like a shadow circulatory system. Celeste led, gun up, checking corners with professional precision. Dominic kept Serafina between them, one hand still locked on her wrist, the other holding a phone that kept buzzing with incoming messages he didn't answer. How bad? Celeste asked, without turning around. 17 arrests so far. They're sweeping the entire staff. Marco got out with the critical files, but they have 3 of my captains in custody. Anyone who'll talk? Everyone talks eventually. They emerged into what looked like an underground garage. Concrete floors, dim lighting, rows of vehicles ranging from sedans to SUVs, all black, all with engines that probably purred like predators. Celeste made for a Range Rover in the back corner, keys already in her hand.
Where are we going? Serafina finally found her voice. Safe house in Cambridge, Dominic said. Off the grid, no paper trail, stocked for extended stays. We sit tight until what? She yanked her wrist free, stumbling back a step. Until the federal agents leave? Until my father shows up to explain why he used me as bait? Until you decide I'm not a traitor and it's safe to let me exist again? Until I know who I can trust. He didn't move to grab her again, just stood there in the red emergency lighting, looking like something carved from shadow and violence. Right now, that's a very short list. And I'm not on it. Would you be? If you were me? The honest answer was no, but she didn't want to give him that. Instead, she climbed into the back of the Range Rover, slammed the door hard enough to make the frame shudder, and stared out the tinted window at nothing. Celeste drove like she was trying to outrun the apocalypse. Fast, aggressive, taking corners that made the tires scream. Nobody spoke. Dominic was on his phone speaking in low Italian that Serafina was starting to recognize as his crisis language. Celeste's eyes kept flicking to the rearview mirror, scanning for tails, for threats, for whatever nightmare came next. They hit Cambridge 40 minutes later, pulling into an underground parking structure beneath a building that looked like every other glass and steel corporate box in the city. Celeste killed the engine, and the sudden silence felt like a physical thing pressing down on Serafina's chest. Third rule of survival, Celeste said, turning to look at her. Don't trust anyone until they've bled for you. Fourth rule? Sometimes not even then. What's the first rule?
Stay alive long enough to learn the others. The safe house was a penthouse that made the estate feel cozy by comparison, all chrome and glass in that aggressively modern aesthetic that screamed money but forgot about warmth. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, bulletproof glass that turned Boston into a glittering sprawl of lights and shadows. Serafina stood in the living room with her arms wrapped around herself, still wearing nothing but a silk robe and bare feet, while Dominic and Celeste conducted what looked like a military debriefing in the kitchen. 3 secured accounts, 2 safe houses in Providence, and the shipping container in Newark. Newark's compromised. They had eyes on the docks for weeks. How do you know? Because Vale gave them transcripts of our port conversations going back 6 months. Dominic's voice was steel-wrapped in exhaustion. He recorded everything, every meeting, every transaction, every name that passed through his ears. Celeste swore viciously in Italian. The Baltimore shipment? Seized, along with everyone stupid enough to be on site when the raid went down. That's 15 people in federal custody, Dominic. 15 people who know your name, your face, your entire operation. I'm aware. So what's the play? We can't stay in the city. Every agency from the FBI to Homeland Security is going to be crawling up our... We're not running, he said it with absolute finality. Running makes us look guilty, and guilty means they get to write the narrative. We stay, we cooperate, we show them exactly what they want to see while protecting what actually matters. And what about her? Celeste jerked her chin toward Serafina. The wife you married for a show who's turning into our biggest liability? That's not decided yet. The hell it's not. She's either with us or against us, and right now all the evidence points to... Evidence? Serafina heard herself interrupt. You want evidence? How about the fact that I had no idea my father was recording you? That I've spent the last decade cleaning up his messes while he lied to my face about getting clean? That I signed your goddamn contract to save his worthless life, and he repaid me by turning me into an accessory to whatever this is? They both turned to look at her, and the weight of their attention was suffocating. How long? Dominic asked quietly. How long what? How long have you been covering for him? Your father? How long have you been fixing his mistakes? The question felt like a trap, but she was too tired to dance around it. Since I was 16, since Mom died and he decided the best way to grieve was to destroy everything she built. And you never thought to walk away? Where was I supposed to go? He's my father. That's not... You don't just abandon family because they're broken. Something flickered across Dominic's face, almost like recognition, almost like pain. But then it was gone, and he was back to being the untouchable crime lord studying her like she was a problem that needed solving. Celeste, get her something to wear, then get some sleep. We have a long day tomorrow. You're kidding. Sleep? After, I need you sharp, not wired. Go. Celeste looked like she wanted to argue, but something in her brother's tone made her bite back the words. She grabbed Serafina's arm, not gentle, but not cruel either, and hauled her down a hallway toward what turned out to be a bedroom decorated in the same aggressive modern style as the rest of the place. Shower's through there. Celeste pointed at a door. Clothes in the closet. Don't try to leave. Don't touch anything electronic. Don't make me regret not shooting you in the bunker. You wouldn't have. You don't know me well enough to guess what I would or wouldn't do.
Celeste moved to leave, then paused in the doorway. For what it's worth, I believe you didn't know about the recordings, but belief doesn't mean trust, and trust is the only currency that matters in this family. So if you want to survive the next 48 hours, you better figure out real fast whose side you're on.
She left before Serafina could respond, the door clicking shut with ominous finality. Serafina stood alone in the too-modern bedroom, staring at her reflection in a mirror that took up half the wall. She looked like a ghost, pale skin, dark circles under her eyes, hair tangled from sleeping and running and being dragged through underground tunnels. The ring on her finger caught the light, white gold that felt heavier than it should. She thought about taking it off, leaving it on the dresser and walking out of this nightmare. Let the federal agents and the Virellis and her bastard father tear each other apart without her. Instead, she stumbled into the shower and let scalding water wash away everything except the hollow certainty that she was trapped, not in the safe house, not in the marriage, but in something bigger and darker that had been building long before she knocked on that first door. The water ran until it went cold, and when she finally emerged, she found clothes laid out on the bed. Jeans, a sweater, socks, everything in her exact size. Either Celeste was a very good guesser, or someone had been planning for this contingency long before tonight's raid. She dressed in silence, then made herself walk back out to the main living area.
Dominic was standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows, still in his rolled-up shirt sleeves, staring out at the city like he was trying to memorize it. A glass of whiskey sat untouched on the table beside him. He didn't turn when she entered, but his shoulders shifted slightly, acknowledgement without welcome. Can't sleep? His voice was rough, scraped raw by too many phone calls. Can you? Not in 15 years. She moved closer, keeping the couch between them like it might somehow make the space safer. What happens now? Now? Federal agents finish ransacking my property, arrest everyone who's too slow or too stupid to disappear, and build a case designed to put me away for the rest of my natural life. Will they succeed? Depends on how many people decide loyalty is worth more than a plea deal. He finally turned to face her, and in the ambient city light, his face looked carved from exhaustion. Your father gave them names, dates, transactions, but he didn't have access to the core operations, which means his information is incomplete, damaging, but not fatal. You sound almost impressed. I'm practical. He played his hand well, got himself immunity, got his daughter protected by marriage law, and disappeared before anyone could retaliate. It's the kind of long game most amateurs don't have the stomach for. Protected by marriage law? The words felt foreign in her mouth. You're a Virelli now, which means attacking you is attacking my family, and even federal prosecutors have to tread carefully around spousal privilege and witness protection. His smile was knife-thin. Your father knew exactly what he was doing when he pushed you into this contract. He made you untouchable. The nausea came fast and vicious. Serafina grabbed the back of the couch, forcing herself to breathe through it. So I'm not a wife. I'm a shield. You're both. Welcome to my world, where nothing is ever just one thing. I could testify against you, against all of this. You could try. He moved toward the whiskey, finally picked it up, took a slow sip. But spousal privilege means they can't compel your testimony in most circumstances. And even if they could, what would you say? That you were forced to marry me? That I threatened your father? Every lawyer in New England would shred that story in minutes, and you'd end up looking like either a liar or an accomplice. There has to be a way out. There's always a way out. He set the glass down with careful precision, but it usually involves body bags. The casual way he said it, like death was just another negotiating tactic, made her skin crawl. But beneath the revulsion was something else. Curiosity, maybe.
Or the terrible recognition that she was standing in the same room with a man who'd built an empire on violence and somehow managed to look more human in his exhaustion than most people did in their best moments. Why did you really marry me? The question came out before she could stop it. The truth. Not the tradition excuse or the debt settlement. Why? Dominic studied her for a long moment, and she watched something war behind his eyes. Calculation versus honesty, control versus the human need to be understood by someone, anyone. Because I'm tired, he said, finally. Tired of fighting wars I didn't start. Tired of watching good people get destroyed because they had the misfortune of being born into this life. Tired of being the monster everyone expects me to be. He paused, and because some part of me thought that maybe, just maybe, having something normal would remind me what it felt like to be human again. How's that working out for you? About as well as expected. A phone buzzed somewhere in the apartment. Dominic pulled it from his pocket, read the screen, and whatever message he saw made his jaw tighten. Problem? Serafina asked. Always. He typed a response, shoved the phone away. One of my captains just cut a deal. Full cooperation in exchange for witness protection. How many does that make? 3 as of 20 minutes ago. At this rate, I'll have no organization left by morning. Maybe that's not a bad thing. His laugh was sharp enough to draw blood. Easy to say when you don't have 17 families depending on you for protection, income, and survival. You think everyone in my organization is a monster? Half of them are single mothers, immigrants trying to build better lives, kids who grew up in neighborhoods where the only choice was join or die. He moved back to the window, hands shoved in his pockets. I dismantle this empire and 300 people lose everything. Federal agents get their headlines, politicians get their talking points, and the vacuum gets filled by someone worse than me. Or maybe it doesn't. Maybe people find legitimate work. Maybe the cycle breaks. The cycle never breaks. It just changes management. His reflection stared back at her from the window glass. You want to know the real tragedy, Serafina? I inherited this empire at 23 because my father got his throat cut during a cartel war he didn't start. I could have walked away, should have walked away. But I had a 12-year-old sister, 60 employees, and rivals who would have burned everything to the ground just to prove they could. So I stayed. I fought. I became exactly what the world needed me to be to keep everyone alive. He turned around. And now I'm standing in a safe house watching everything I built collapse because I tried to do one decent thing and marry a woman whose father sold me out. The silence stretched between them, heavy with things neither could say. I didn't know, Serafina whispered. I swear to you, I didn't know what he was doing. I believe you. You do? I've spent 15 years reading People for Survival. You're a terrible liar. If you'd known, you would have told me during that first meeting, or tried to negotiate better terms, or shown any of the 1,000 tells that come with deception. He moved closer, stopping just outside touching distance. But that doesn't mean I trust you. Trust requires more than innocence. What does it require? Time, sacrifice, proving that when everything's on fire, you choose to stay rather than run. His eyes searched her face. Can you do that, Serafina? When federal agents come knocking? When my enemies put a price on your head? When staying means becoming part of something you've spent your whole life trying to avoid? She wanted to say yes. Wanted to be the person who could shoulder that weight, make that promise, become whatever this nightmare required. But honesty was all she had left. I don't know. At least you're honest. He stepped back, creating distance again. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we deal with the fallout, and you'll need to be sharp. What about you? I'll sleep when I'm dead. That might be sooner than you think. His smile was razor-edged. Story of my life, wife. She left him standing at the window, silhouetted against the city lights, and retreated to the too-modern bedroom where she lay awake until dawn painted the sky orange and red, thinking about fathers who betrayed daughters, husbands who married strangers, and the 1,000 ways a life could shatter without making a sound. Morning came with Celeste pounding on her door like she was trying to break it down. Up, now. We have a situation. Serafina stumbled out of bed. She'd finally fallen asleep sometime around 5, and found Celeste in tactical gear again, looking like she'd either been awake all night or had never needed sleep in the first place. What kind of situation? The kind where federal agents are holding a press conference in 45 minutes announcing they've dismantled the Varelli criminal enterprise, and we need you camera ready to sit beside Dominic while he plays the misunderstood businessman. You're joking. Do I look like I'm joking? Hair, makeup, professional clothes, the full performance. You're going on television as the devoted wife standing by her wrongly accused husband. Celeste tossed a garment bag onto the bed. You have 30 minutes. I can't. Yes, you can. Because the alternative is they control the narrative, call you a victim of trafficking or a co-conspirator, and destroy whatever credibility you have left. Celeste grabbed her shoulders, forcing eye contact. Listen to me. This press conference is warfare by another name. Every word, every expression, every second of footage will be analyzed by federal prosecutors, defense attorneys, and rival families looking for weakness. You go out there and show them steel, or you become the liability that brings us all down. I never asked for this. None of us asked for this. But here we are, so put on the goddamn dress and act like you know how to survive. 28 minutes later, Serafina was staring at herself in a mirror wearing a charcoal dress that probably cost more than her previous annual income. Her hair pulled back in a style that looked effortlessly elegant but had taken a professional stylist. Appeared out of nowhere, 15 minutes to achieve. Makeup disguised the shadows under her eyes, made her look composed instead of terrified. She looked like someone else entirely, someone who belonged in this world. Dominic was waiting in the living room, wearing a suit that had probably been hand-tailored by someone whose waiting list measured in years. He looked every inch the legitimate businessman, professional, controlled, dangerous in ways that didn't translate to camera but radiated in person. Good, he said, scanning her. You look the part. What part is that? The woman who loves me too much to believe the lies. He moved closer and she caught the scent of his cologne. Dark, expensive, somehow comforting despite everything. When they ask you questions, and they will, you say we fell in love quickly, got married quietly, and you support me completely. Nothing more, nothing less. They're going to ask about my father. And you say you haven't spoken to him in weeks and hope he's safe wherever he is. Worried daughter, not vengeful victim. That's lying. That's survival. His hand came up, cupped her face with surprising gentleness. I know this isn't what you wanted. But right now, this moment, we're on the same side whether we like it or not. So I need you to trust me for the next 2 hours. Can you do that? She should say no. Should refuse to participate in whatever theater he was orchestrating. Instead, she found herself nodding, leaning fractionally into the warmth of his palm, taking comfort from the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting beneath her feet. Good girl. The press conference happened in a hotel ballroom downtown, cameras and reporters packed in like wolves circling wounded prey. Serafina sat beside Dominic at a long table, hands folded in her lap to hide the shaking, while he delivered a statement that was masterful in its controlled outrage. These allegations are categorically false, he said, voice steady. My family has operated legitimate businesses in Massachusetts for 3 generations. We've paid our taxes, supported our communities, and built reputations based on integrity and hard work. The federal government's overreach in this matter is not only unjust, it's an assault on every immigrant family that's fought to build something in this country. Serafina watched him transform before her eyes. The crime lord disappeared, replaced by someone who looked and sounded like the American dream personified. She could see reporters buying it, see cameras eating up every word. Questions? Dominic's lawyer, a shark in Armani, opened the floor. Mr. Varelli, what do you say to witnesses who claim you've orchestrated illegal activities for over a decade? I say they're either mistaken or coerced. Federal pressure can make innocent people say extraordinary things. And your recent marriage? Some suggest it was time to coincide with this investigation. My marriage, Dominic said, reaching over to take Serafina's hand, has nothing to do with business. I fell in love with an extraordinary woman, and we chose to build a life together. The timing is coincidental, nothing more. His hand was warm around hers, his grip firm. She forced herself not to flinch, to sit there like the devoted wife he needed her to be. Mrs. Varelli, you've been notably silent. Do you have anything to say about these allegations? Every camera swung toward her, every lens focused like a rifle scope. Dominic's hand tightened fractionally, warning or encouragement, she couldn't tell. I say,
she began, keeping her voice steady, that I know my husband, I know his heart, and I know that he's being targeted because powerful people find it easier to destroy what they don't understand than to acknowledge the good work he's done. The lies tasted like ash. I stand by him completely. Even though your father is currently wanted for questioning in connection with, my father's choices are his own. The words came out harder than she intended. I hope he's safe. I hope he comes forward to clear his name. But his situation doesn't change what I know about Dominic. More questions, more deflections, more careful dancing around the truth while maintaining the fiction. Serafina watched Dominic work the room with the skill of someone who'd spent a lifetime learning to lie without technically lying, to project innocence while everyone in the room knew better but couldn't prove it. When it finally ended, they were escorted out through a service entrance, bundled back into the Range Rover, and halfway to Cambridge before anyone spoke. You did well, Celeste said from the driver's seat. Better than expected. I feel like I need a shower. Welcome to the family business, honey. We're all dirty here. Back at the safe house, Dominic disappeared into what looked like a home office, door closed, phone pressed to his ear. Serafina stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows watching the city, trying to process what she'd just done. She'd lied on camera, defended a criminal, made herself complicit in whatever came next. And the worst part? It had felt almost natural, like something she'd been training for without knowing it. All those years of covering for her father's mistakes, smoothing over his disasters, learning to smile while everything burned. You're thinking too loud. Celeste appeared beside her, 2 glasses of whiskey in hand. She offered one. Drink, it helps. Serafina took it, more for something to do with her hands than because she wanted it. How do you live like this? You mean lying, performing, pretending we're something we're not? Celeste laughed, dark and bitter. You don't. You just survive each day and tell yourself tomorrow will be different, even though you know it won't be. That's not living. No, but it's what we've got. She knocked back half her whiskey in one swallow. You want to know the truth about Dominic, the real truth, not the pretty version he sells to cameras? I don't know if I want to know anything anymore. Too bad. You're part of this now, which means you get the whole ugly picture. Celeste moved to the couch, sprawled across it like she owned the world. Our father was a vicious bastard who built his empire on fear and bloodshed. He made enemies like some people collect stamps, and when he finally got what was coming to him, it left Dominic holding a bomb with the pin already pulled. He was 23. I was 12. And suddenly we had 60 terrified employees, 3 rival families circling like sharks, and about 15 seconds to decide if we were going to run or fight. He chose to fight. He chose to survive, which meant becoming worse than our father ever was, at least on the surface. You know how many people Dominic's killed? She didn't wait for an answer. Neither do I. But I know how many he saved, how many families still have food on their tables because he protected their businesses, how many kids made it to college because he funded scholarships nobody talks about, how many women escaped trafficking operations he dismantled from the inside. She met Serafina's eyes. He's not a good man, but he's not the monster they want you to believe either. Why are you telling me this? Because you're going to have to choose soon. Stay or run. Trust or betray. And I need you to make that choice with full information. Celeste finished her whiskey. Also because if you hurt him, I'll kill you myself, just so we're clear on family dynamics. Before Serafina could respond, the office door slammed open and Dominic emerged looking like he'd aged a decade in the last hour. We have a problem. Another one? Celeste was on her feet instantly. What now? Eastern Syndicate just put a price on Serafina's head, $2 million dead or alive. The world tilted. Serafina grabbed the back of the couch, forcing herself to stay upright. What? They think you're my weakness. Kill you, send a message, destabilize my organization while the feds are circling. Dominic was already moving, pulling weapons from hidden compartments, checking magazines with mechanical precision. We need to relocate. Now. This safe house was secure, but it won't stand up to a concentrated assault. How did they even know where... Celeste stopped. The press conference. We let them see her face, confirmed the marriage, basically painted a target on her back. We didn't have a choice. Federal optics required, screw federal optics. We just fed your wife to...
I know what we did. The words came out sharp enough to cut. Dominic stopped moving, closed his eyes, forced control back into his voice. I know, but we move forward, not back. Get the go bags. We leave in 5 minutes. Celeste disappeared down the hallway. Dominic moved to Serafina, hands on her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. Listen to me. The next few days are going to be the most dangerous of your life. People are going to try to kill you to hurt me. They're going to use you to leverage cooperation, to break my network, to prove that nothing I care about is safe. His grip tightened. But I will not let them succeed. Do you understand? Whatever it takes, however ugly it gets, I will keep you alive. Why? The word came out broken. Why does it matter? This was supposed to be a contract. Business. Why do you even... Because you're my wife. He said it with an intensity that made her breath catch. And in my world, that means something. It means I protect what's mine even if it costs me everything else. I'm not yours. I'm not anyone's. Then whose side are you on when they come through that door? The question hung between them, sharp and unavoidable. And Serafina realized with sudden, terrible clarity that there was no neutral ground anymore. No option to wait this out, stay small, survive by not choosing. Her father had used her as a pawn. The feds wanted to use her as leverage. The Eastern Syndicate wanted to use her as a corpse. The only person in this entire nightmare who was actually trying to keep her alive was the man she'd married under duress less than 48 hours ago. Yours, she heard herself say. I'm on your side. Something blazed in his eyes. Relief, maybe, or recognition. Then we survived this together. Celeste reappeared with tactical gear, weapons, and bags that looked packed for war. Vehicles are ready. I've got 3 routes mapped, 4 backup locations. Where do you want? The window exploded. Glass showered inward like crystal rain. Serafina hit the floor before her brain registered the gunfire, Dominic's body covering hers, weight pressing her into the carpet while bullets carved chunks out of walls and furniture. She could hear Celeste returning fire, could smell gunpowder and blood, could feel Dominic's heart hammering against her back. Kitchen! He shouted over the chaos. Move! They crawled through debris and smoke, glass cutting her hands, her knees, her face. More gunfire, more windows shattering, voices shouting in languages she didn't understand. Celeste was ahead of them, weapon blazing, clearing a path toward... Dominic grunted, body jerking. Hot blood splashed across Serafina's neck. No! She grabbed him, trying to see the wound, trying to stop the bleeding, trying to do anything besides watch him die on top of her. Dominic, stay with me. You can't... Keep moving. His voice was tight with pain, but still in control. Get to the garage. Now. You're bleeding. I'll live. Celeste! His sister materialized from the smoke, took one look at him, and her face went hard. How bad? Shoulder. Through and through. I'm mobile. He shoved Serafina toward Celeste. Get her out. That's an order. I'm not leaving you, Serafina started. Yes, you are. He met her eyes, and there was something raw in his expression, something that looked almost like fear. Because if you die, this was all for nothing. Every choice, every sacrifice, every compromise. You live or none of it mattered. Understand? She didn't. Didn't understand how she'd become important enough to die for in less than 2 days. Didn't understand how a contract marriage had turned into something that made him look at her like she was worth more than his empire. Didn't understand anything except that the man bleeding in front of her was willing to take a bullet to keep her breathing. I understand, she lied. Celeste hauled her toward the kitchen while Dominic provided cover, his shots precise despite the blood soaking through his shirt. They hit the service elevator, descended 3 floors in silence broken only by Serafina's ragged breathing, and emerged into a parking garage where 2 vehicles waited with engines already running. Get in, Celeste commanded, shoving her toward an armored SUV. We're going dark. No phones, no contact, no stopping until... A figure stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. Male, mid-40s, expensive suit, and a gun pointed directly at Serafina's chest. Mrs. Varelli, he said in accent-free English. On behalf of the Eastern Syndicate, I'm here to collect. Celeste's weapon was up instantly, but the man didn't even flinch. You shoot me. My men upstairs kill your brother. We all know he's wounded, which means he's vulnerable.
So here's what happens next. You give me the girl, I disappear, your brother lives to see tomorrow. Counteroffer, Celeste said coldly. I kill you, gut shoot, so it's slow, and use your screams to buy us time to escape. Bold, but impractical. He smiled, and it was the smile of someone who'd already won. Your brother's bleeding out while we negotiate. Every second you delay, he gets weaker. How long do you think he has? 5 minutes? 10? Tick-tock, Miss Varelli. Serafina felt something crystallize inside her, all the fear, the anger, the desperate confusion solidifying into one clear, sharp truth. She was done being a pawn, done letting men in expensive suits dictate her fate, done surviving on someone else's terms. No, she said. Everyone looked at her. Even Celeste seemed surprised. No? The man's smile widened. I don't think you understand. I understand perfectly. Serafina stepped forward, deliberately placing herself between Celeste and the gun. You want to kill me to send a message, to prove that nothing the Varelli family cares about is safe, to show that you can reach into their world and take whatever you want. She kept walking, closing the distance. But here's what you don't understand. I'm not their weakness. I'm their declaration of war. She grabbed his wrist, the one holding the gun, and twisted hard. The weapon discharged, deafening in the enclosed space, the bullet ricocheting off concrete. Celeste moved like lightning, putting 2 rounds through the man's chest before he could recover. He went down hard, blood spreading across expensive fabric, surprise frozen on his face. Serafina stood over him, breathing hard, her hands shaking with adrenaline. Behind her, Celeste was laughing, sharp, disbelieving, maybe slightly unhinged. I take back every bad thing I thought about you, Celeste said. You might actually survive this family. More gunfire from above. Shouts, the sound of sirens in the distance. We need to move, Serafina said, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. Dominic's running out of time. They hit the elevator again, ascending back into smoke and chaos. Dominic was exactly where they'd left him, propped against the wall, one hand pressed to his shoulder, the other still holding his weapon. When he saw Serafina, something like relief flickered across his face. You're alive. So are you, barely. She grabbed his uninjured arm, hauled him toward the door. Celeste, we need medical... Already arranged. There's a doctor waiting at the backup location. Celeste took Dominic's other side, and together they half-carried, half-dragged him toward the stairwell. Can you walk? Can I breathe? Then I can walk. They made it to the garage, into the SUV, pulling out just as federal agents swarmed the building from every direction. Celeste drove like the devil himself was chasing them, weaving through traffic, running lights, creating distance between them and the war zone they'd barely escaped. In the back seat, Serafina pressed her hands against Dominic's wound, trying to slow the bleeding, her palms slick with his blood. Stay with me, she whispered. You don't get to take a bullet for me and then die. That's not how this works. His eyes focused on her face, gray and storm dark, and somehow still in control despite the blood loss. Bossy. You married me. You get what you get. Apparently I got someone who disarms syndicate hitmen with her bare hands. His laugh turned into a cough. Celeste? Shut up and conserve your strength, brother. We'll debrief after the doctor stitches you back together. They drove for an hour, maybe more, time blurring into an endless tunnel of streetlights and Dominic's shallow breathing. When they finally stopped, it was at a warehouse on the outskirts of the city, all rusted metal and broken windows. Not exactly what Serafina expected for emergency medical care. The doctor was a woman in her 60s who took one look at Dominic and sighed like she'd seen this 1,000 times before. Celeste, you promised me last time was the last time. I lied. Fix him. Bring him inside, and you, she looked at Serafina, start boiling water. This is going to get messy. It did. Dominic passed out somewhere between the bullet extraction and the stitching, his face gray, breathing shallow. Serafina held his hand the whole time, gripping tight like she could keep him tethered to consciousness through sheer force of will. When the doctor finally stepped back, arms bloody to the elbows, she looked tired enough to collapse. He'll live, but he needs rest, fluids, and about 48 hours of not getting shot at. Can you manage that? We can try, Celeste said. Try harder. I'm getting too old for this, and so is he. The doctor packed up her equipment. The girl can stay with him. He'll want to see her when he wakes up.
After she left, Celeste helped move Dominic to a makeshift bed in what had probably been an office before the warehouse got abandoned. Serafina sat beside him, watching his chest rise and fall, still holding his hand because letting go felt impossible. "Why did you do it?" Celeste asked from the doorway. "Do what?" "Go for the gun. You could have run, should have run. Instead, you threw yourself at an armed man like you actually gave a damn whether we lived or died." Serafina stared at Dominic's pale face, the bandages stark white against his skin. "He took a bullet for me. Seemed only fair to return the favor." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." Celeste studied her for a long moment. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect? Someone weak, someone who'd crumble the first time things got ugly." She moved into the room, grabbed a chair, spun it around, and straddled it. "Someone like every other pretty face my brother's ever looked at twice. But you're not, are you? You're steel wrapped in silk, dangerous in ways nobody sees coming." "I'm just trying to survive." "No, you're trying to win. There's a difference." Celeste leaned forward. "So here's what happens next. Federal agents are going to come looking. Eastern Syndicate is going to send more people. And everyone in this godforsaken city is going to try to use you to destroy my brother. Your next 48 hours, they decide whether you become family or a corpse. Choose wisely." She left before Serafina could respond. Alone in the dim warehouse office, listening to Dominic breathe and sirens wail, somewhere in the city beyond, Serafina looked down at the blood on her hands. His blood, mixed with her own from cuts she didn't remember getting, and realized she'd already made her choice. Not during the gunfight, not in the garage, but the moment she'd said, "I'm on your side," and meant it. She'd crossed a line somewhere between the estate and the safe house, between the press conference and the bullet. And now there was no going back, no neutral ground, no way to pretend she was anything other than exactly what Celeste had called her. A Virelli. For better or worse, in blood and survival, until death or federal prison did them part. Dominic's eyes opened sometime near dawn, focusing slowly on her face. "You stayed," he whispered. "Where else would I go?" His fingers tightened around hers. "Thank you." "For what?" "For choosing to stay when running would have been smarter. For disarming a killer when you had no training. For pressing your hands against my wound like you could hold my life in your palms and refuse to let it slip away." He paused, breath shallow. "For making me believe that maybe, just maybe, I'm worth saving after all." The words hit her like a physical blow. Here was a man who'd built an empire on violence, who'd spent 15 years becoming the monster his world required, looking at her like she was the first good thing he'd seen in all that darkness. And God help her, she was starting to believe he might be worth it too. "Don't die on me, Virelli," she said roughly. "We have a contract to fulfill." His smile was weak but genuine. "Yes, wife. Whatever you say." Outside, the sun was rising over Boston. Inside the warehouse, Dominic Virelli's blood was drying on Serafina's hands, while federal agents and syndicate killers closed in from every direction. And somewhere in the back of her mind, Serafina heard her own voice whispering the terrible truth she'd been avoiding since the moment she walked into his study. She wasn't surviving this marriage. She was falling into it. And when it all came crashing down, and it would, because nothing this intense ever ended well, she would have no one to blame but herself for staying when every instinct screamed, "Run." But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, she was going to sit beside her husband and hold his hand while he healed from the bullet he took protecting her. Tonight, she was going to be exactly what she'd promised, steel wrapped in silk, dangerous in ways nobody saw coming. A Virelli wife, standing at the edge of war, ready to burn the whole world down if that's what survival required. The point of no return had already passed. Now came the part where they either won together or died trying. Dominic was on his feet within 36 hours, which the doctor said was medically inadvisable, and Celeste called typically stubborn. Serafina watched him move through the warehouse like a wounded predator, slower than before, one arm held careful against his ribs, but still radiating that controlled violence that made people step back without realizing they were doing it. "You should be resting," she said when she found him at 3 a.m, standing in front of a wall covered in surveillance photos, financial documents, and red string connecting faces to locations to crimes. Can't rest. Too many people depending on me not bleeding out in a warehouse. He didn't turn around. Besides, sleep is for people with clear consciences. She moved beside him, studying the makeshift investigation board. Her father's face was there, connected to federal agents, Eastern Syndicate contacts, and a dozen financial transactions that painted a picture of systematic betrayal spanning months. "How long?" she asked quietly. "How long what?" "How long did you know he was going to sell you out?" Dominic finally looked at her, and the exhaustion in his eyes was bone deep. "I suspected after the Baltimore shipment went sideways. Knew for certain when the federal warrant specified accounts only 3 people had access to: me, my accountant, and your father, who I'd stupidly trusted with operational details during our debt negotiations." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you would have warned him. Family loyalty is predictable, even when it's misplaced." He gestured to the board. "I let him think he was winning, let him record conversations, gather evidence, build his case. Because as long as he thought he was playing me, I knew exactly what information the feds had and what they didn't." The implications settled like ice in her stomach. "The marriage. You knew he was going to disappear after the ceremony." "I suspected. Hoped I was wrong." His jaw tightened. "Turns out I wasn't wrong enough. So I really was just bait. A way to keep him close until—" "No." The word came out sharp. "You were insurance. A way to protect you when everything collapsed, which I knew it would eventually. Your father made sure of that the moment he started recording my conversations." Dominic turned back to the board. "What I didn't anticipate was how quickly the Eastern Syndicate would move, or how willing they'd be to risk open warfare in a city crawling with federal agents. Maybe they're desperate, or maybe someone told them exactly when and where to strike." He tapped a photo. The man from the garage, now identified with a name and dossier. Marcus Webb. Mid-level enforcer, no strategic thinking, definitely not the brains behind a coordinated assault on a secured location, which means someone fed him information, someone who knew where we'd go when the estate was compromised. Serafina studied the board, following connections, seeing patterns emerge. "You think there's still a traitor in your organization?" "I know there is. The question is who and how deep the rot goes." He pulled down a photo, replaced it with another. "Your father couldn't have orchestrated this alone. He had help from inside my operation, someone with access to security protocols, safe house locations, operational timelines, someone I trust." "How many people is that?" "4. Maybe 5 if I'm being generous." His voice went flat. "And one of them is my sister." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Serafina wanted to laugh, to dismiss it as paranoia brought on by blood loss and stress, but the cold calculation in Dominic's eyes stopped her. "You can't seriously think Celeste." "I don't want to think it, but I can't afford not to." He moved to another section of the board, where Celeste's movements over the past month were documented in disturbing detail. "She was at the estate when your father's security was deactivated. She knew which safe house we'd use after the raid. She drove us to Cambridge and parked in the exact spot that gave Marcus Webb a clean line of sight through the windows." "That could be coincidence." "I don't believe in coincidence. Not in my world." He turned to face her fully. "And neither should you. Not anymore." Before she could respond, footsteps echoed through the warehouse. Celeste appeared from the shadows, 2 coffees in hand, looking like she'd slept even less than Dominic. "You're supposed to be resting, not playing detective at 3 a.m. She handed him one of the coffees, then noticed Serafina. "Oh, good. The wife's awake. We need to talk." "About?" Dominic's tone was carefully neutral. "About the fact that federal agents just raided our Providence safe house and arrested everyone inside. About the fact that someone leaked the location of our Newark operation to Homeland Security. About the fact that every secure location we have is suddenly not secure anymore." She took a long drink, eyes hard. "We have a leak, Dominic, and it's not the dead girl's daddy." "I know." "Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're so busy playing house with your contract wife that you're missing the obvious." Celeste set down her coffee with deliberate precision. "Someone in our inner circle is burning us from the inside, and until we figure out who, we're all dead." "Any suspects?" His voice gave nothing away. 3. Your accountant, who's had access to everything financial. Marco, who's been coordinating security and knew about every safe house. And Vincent, who's been handling our federal lawyer communications and would know exactly what to leak for maximum damage. She paused. I've got people watching all of them. Give me 48 hours, and I'll have answers. And what about you? The question dropped like a bomb. Celeste went very still. Excuse me? You heard me. Dominic moved closer, and Serafina could see the muscles in his jaw working. You were at every critical juncture. You had access to every location that's been compromised. You drove us directly into an ambush at Cambridge. I saved your life at Cambridge. After parking in the exact spot that gave the shooter optimal positioning. His voice was ice wrapped in silk. So I'll ask again. Should I be looking at you, sister? The silence stretched so tight, Serafina thought it might snap. Celeste's face had gone from shock to fury to something that looked almost like hurt, all in the space of 3 seconds. You think I'd betray you? Not a question, an accusation. After everything, after 15 years of bleeding for this family, you think I'd sell you out? I think someone did, and I think they're smart enough to make it look like they're above suspicion. Dominic didn't blink. So prove me wrong. Account for your movements. Show me I'm paranoid instead of right. Screw you. Celeste was already moving toward the door. I'm done. You want to tear this family apart looking for ghosts? Do it without me. Celeste. But she was gone, footsteps echoing through the warehouse. Then the slam of a door, then silence. Serafina exhaled slowly. You shouldn't have done that. Had to. If she's innocent, she'll come back with proof. If she's guilty, she'll run. He returned to the board, but his hands were shaking slightly. Either way, I'll know. And if you're wrong, if you just destroyed your relationship with the only family you have left, then I'll apologize. His voice was hollow. After I make sure we survive long enough for apologies to matter. She wanted to argue, to tell him that family was worth more than paranoid survival strategies. But she'd watched her own father sell her out without hesitation. So maybe Dominic's cold calculus was the only rational response in a world where everyone betrayed everyone eventually. Instead, she moved to the board, studying the faces, the connections, the web of lies that kept expanding. What do you need me to do? He looked at her like she'd just spoken a foreign language. You don't have to. Yes, I do. You took a bullet for me. You married me to protect me from consequences I didn't even know existed. So what do you need? She met his eyes. I'm done being passive, done letting other people dictate my survival. Tell me how to help. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or the beginning of respect. There's a federal prosecutor named Sarah Chen. She's leading the investigation against me, and according to my sources, she's been receiving information from someone inside my organization for 6 months. I need to know who her source is. And how am I supposed to find that out? By walking into her office tomorrow morning and offering to testify against me. The floor seemed to tilt. You want me to what? The feds think you're a victim, an innocent wife caught up in her husband's criminal enterprise. They'll jump at the chance to flip you, especially if you come to them voluntarily. He pulled a folder from beneath the surveillance photos, handed it to her. Everything you need to know is in here. Chen's background, her case history, her pressure points. You go in scared, confused, desperate to protect yourself. You offer to cooperate in exchange for immunity. And then what? I actually testify against you? No. You feed them information I want them to have while figuring out who their inside source is. Names, dates, communication patterns, anything that tells me who's been bleeding my operation dry. His eyes were cold gray. Think you can lie convincingly enough to fool federal prosecutors? She thought about the press conference, about standing in front of cameras and defending a man she barely knew, about the lies that had come so easily once she decided to commit to them. Yes. Even knowing that if they catch you lying, you'll go to prison? Even knowing that. He studied her for a long moment. You're not what I expected, Serafina Vale. It's Serafina Varelli now. She said it deliberately, claiming the name like armor. And you're stuck with me, so you better get used to unexpected. His smile was knife-thin but genuine. God help us both. The federal building was all glass and steel, and the kind of oppressive authority that made honest people feel guilty just walking through the doors. Serafina sat in an interview room with plastic chairs and fluorescent lighting that made everything look sickly, waiting for Sarah Chen and trying not to let her hands shake. The folder Dominic had given her was memorized and burned. Every detail about Chen's career, her failed marriage, her obsession with taking down organized crime families as penance for growing up in a neighborhood controlled by them. Serafina knew which buttons to push, which fears to exploit, which hopes to dangle just out of reach. When Chen finally walked in, she was smaller than expected, 5 foot nothing in sensible heels, dark hair pulled back severe, eyes that missed nothing. She sat across from Serafina with a legal pad and the kind of controlled patience that came from interrogating liars for a living. "Mrs. Varelli, thank you for coming in voluntarily." "I didn't know what else to do." Serafina let her voice shake. "Everything's falling apart, and I don't know who to trust anymore." "Why don't you start at the beginning? How did you meet Dominic Varelli?" She told the story Dominic had crafted: scared daughter, trying to save her father, forced into a marriage she didn't want, discovering too late that her husband was everything the rumors said and worse. She cried at the right moments, hesitated when Chen pushed too hard, showed just enough fear to seem genuine without tipping into performance. Chen took notes, asked follow-up questions, circled back to inconsistencies that didn't exist. And through it all, Serafina watched for tells, for the moment when Chen revealed something only an inside source could have provided. "Your father recorded conversations with Mr. Varelli over a 6-month period," Chen said, sliding a document across the table. "Were you aware of these recordings?" "No, I told you. I barely spoke to my father during—" "And yet you married Dominic Varelli 3 days before your father disappeared. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say?" "Convenient for who?" "I'm the one sitting in a federal building terrified that my husband is going to have me killed for talking to you." "Is that a genuine fear? Has Mr. Varelli threatened you?" Serafina thought about the warehouse, about Dominic bleeding on top of her while bullets carved the air, about the way he'd looked at her when she'd disarmed Marcus Webb like violence was the most natural thing in the world. "He doesn't have to threaten. People around him just end up dead." Chen leaned forward. "Then help me put him away. Testify about what you've seen, what you know. We can offer you full immunity, witness protection, a new life where you never have to be afraid again." It was a good pitch, almost convincing, but Serafina had learned to read people from years of managing her father's disasters, and Chen was pushing too hard too fast, like she was working against a deadline. "I need time to think." "We don't have time, Mrs. Varelli. Every day we wait, more evidence disappears, more witnesses recant, more people die. Your husband is dismantling his operation from the inside to avoid prosecution, and if we don't move now, he walks." There it was, the slip. Because Dominic wasn't dismantling anything, he was consolidating, protecting, preparing for siege. The only way Chen would think he was dismantling was if her source was feeding her deliberate misinformation, which meant her source was protecting Dominic, not betraying him. Serafina felt the pieces click into place with sickening clarity. "Who else has offered to testify?" she asked carefully. "I can't discuss other witnesses, but there are others. People inside his organization who want out." She watched Chen's face. "How many?" "Enough to build a comprehensive case, but we need someone close to him, someone he trusts." Chen's eyes were intense. "Someone like you." "And if I say yes? What happens to my father?" "His immunity deal stands. He cooperates. He stays safe." "Where is he now?" "Protective custody. I can arrange a meeting if it would help you decide." "No." Serafina stood up, chair scraping loud in the small room. "I need to think about this. Alone. Without federal prosecutors pressuring me into decisions I'm not ready to make." Chen stood too, handed her a business card. "Call me when you're ready. But don't wait too long, Mrs. Varelli. The clock is running out for everyone involved." Serafina took the card, nodded, and walked out of the federal building on legs that felt like water. She made it 3 blocks before ducking into an alley and throwing up everything in her stomach, because she'd just figured out who the traitor was, and the answer was so much worse than any of them had imagined. She found Dominic at the warehouse, still standing in front of his investigation board like he'd never left. When she walked in, he turned, and whatever he saw on her face made him go very still. "What happened?" "Chen has a source, someone feeding her information about your operations, your movements, your plans." Serafina moved closer, forcing herself to hold his gaze. "But the information is wrong. Deliberately wrong. Whoever's talking to her is feeding misinformation designed to make the feds look in the wrong places while you consolidate power. His expression didn't change. You're sure? She said you were dismantling your operation, but you're not. You're protecting it, hiding assets, moving people. The only way she'd think otherwise is if someone was lying to her. She paused. Someone who wants the feds to waste resources chasing ghosts while the real operation continues untouched. That's a dangerous game. One wrong move and the misinformation becomes evidence. Unless the person feeding it knows exactly what they're doing, unless they're smart enough to stay ahead of federal investigators while appearing to cooperate. She pulled out her phone, showed him a photo she'd taken of documents on Chen's desk, blurry but readable. Look at the case file number. Then look at this. She pulled up another image, this one from his investigation board. Same case file number, same format, same source. These documents came from inside your organization, she said quietly. Someone with access to legal files, federal communications, prosecution strategies. Someone who could feed the feds information while simultaneously warning you what they knew. Dominic's face had gone very white. Vincent, your federal lawyer, the one coordinating your defense, managing witness testimonies, handling all communication with prosecutors. She watched understanding dawn in his eyes. He's not betraying you to the feds. He's using them to eliminate your competition while keeping you one step ahead of prosecution. That son of a... Dominic's fist slammed into the wall hard enough to crack plaster. Vincent's been representing me for 8 years. I trusted him with everything. And he's been protecting you. Just not the way you thought. Serafina moved to the board, started rearranging photos, following the connections. Every raid that happened, every arrest, they were your rivals, your enemies, people who threatened your territory. Vincent fed Chen enough information to take them down while making you look like you were being dismantled too. The feds think they're winning. Your enemies think you're vulnerable, but really, Vincent's been orchestrating the biggest power consolidation in Boston criminal history, using federal resources to eliminate my competition. Dominic laughed, sharp and bitter. That's either genius or insane. Maybe both. But it means you were right about one thing. Someone was using the investigation to their advantage. You just had the motivation backwards. Which means Celeste is innocent. And you accused your sister of treason based on circumstantial evidence, while the real traitor was sitting in strategy meetings telling you exactly how to avoid prosecution. Dominic closed his eyes. I need to find her, apologize, before she does something stupid like... His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered on speaker. Dominic Varelli? Male voice, professional, cold. This is Special Agent Morrison with the FBI. We have your sister in custody. She walked into our field office an hour ago and offered full cooperation in exchange for immunity. We're currently in negotiation, but I thought you'd want to know that your organization is officially over. Have a nice evening. The line went dead. The phone slipped from Dominic's hand, clattered across concrete. Serafina watched him stand there, frozen, while his world collapsed for the second time in as many days. She didn't run, he whispered. She went to the feds. Because you accused her of betraying you. Because you destroyed 15 years of loyalty with paranoid suspicion. Serafina's voice was gentle but unforgiving. She's not the traitor. She's the casualty of you looking for one. I have to fix this. How? She's already talking. By now she's given them everything. Names, locations, evidence you can't destroy fast enough to matter. She moved in front of him, forcing eye contact. Your sister just burned your entire operation to the ground because you made her believe you didn't trust her. That's not something you fix with an apology. His eyes were devastated. What do I do? You survive. You adapt. You figure out how to live with consequences. She grabbed his shoulders. And you stop treating everyone like an enemy before you end up completely alone. I'm already alone. No, you have me. He laughed, hollow and broken. For how long? Until you figure out I'm more monster than man? Until you realize staying means destroying yourself? Maybe. She didn't sugarcoat it. But right now, this second, you have me. So stop wallowing and start thinking like the crime lord everyone's terrified of. Celeste is talking. Vincent is playing both sides. The feds are closing in. What's your move? He stared at her like she was speaking a language he'd forgotten. Then something hardened in his expression. the monster sliding back into place, cold and calculating and utterly in control. We go on offense. If Celeste is cooperating with the feds, I need to know exactly what she's telling them so I can stay ahead of prosecution. If Vincent is manipulating federal investigations, I need proof before I put a bullet in his head. And if the Eastern Syndicate thinks I'm weak right now, I need to remind them why nobody attacks a Virelli and lives to celebrate. That's your plan? Violence and espionage? That's survival. Welcome to my world, wife. Before she could respond, the warehouse door exploded inward. Not crashed, not kicked open. Exploded, C4 or something equally destructive, turning solid steel into shrapnel that screamed through the air like horizontal rain. Serafina hit the ground on instinct, Dominic's body covering hers again. Deja vu made nightmare. Smoke poured through the opening. Figures moved through it. Tactical gear, military precision, too many to count. Not police. Not feds. Something worse. Eastern Syndicate! Dominic was already pulling her toward the back exit, weapon appearing in his hand from nowhere. Move! They ran through the warehouse, weaving between machinery and storage containers while gunfire chased them. Serafina's lungs burned, her legs screamed, but she kept moving because stopping meant dying, and she'd already decided death wasn't on today's agenda. They burst out a service door into an alley where a car was waiting, engine running, driver already dead behind the wheel, 3 bullets through the windshield. Dominic yanked the body out, shoved Serafina into the passenger seat, and was peeling out before she'd even closed the door. How did they find us? She was shouting over the engine roar. Vincent has to be. He knew about this location. Dominic took a corner hard enough to make the tires scream, which means he's not just playing the feds, he's playing everyone. Me, Chen, the Eastern Syndicate, keeping all sides fighting while he positions himself to take over after the dust settles. That's insane. That's ambition. He was checking mirrors, scanning for pursuit, and I should have seen it coming. Nobody stays loyal in this business. Everyone's just waiting for the right moment to knife you in the back and take your throne. I'm not. He glanced at her, something raw in his expression. You should be. Would be smarter. Smart doesn't keep you alive in your world. Stubborn does. A car appeared behind them. Black SUV, tinted windows. Definitely not friendly. Dominic swore viciously and floored the accelerator, throwing them back in their seats. There's a gun in the glove box. Know how to use it? Point and shoot? Close enough? Roll down your window, lean out, aim for their windshield. Don't worry about accuracy, just make them think twice about getting close. Serafina grabbed this weapon. Felt heavier than expected, cold and deadly, and somehow right in her palm. She rolled down the window, twisted in her seat, and fired 3 shots that went wild but got the message across. The SUV swerved, fell back, then accelerated again. They're persistent, Dominic muttered. Hold on. He cranked the wheel hard, sending them careening into an underground parking structure. Down, down, concrete spiraling past in a blur. The SUV followed, closing distance. More gunfire, bullets sparking off metal. Serafina fired back, aiming better this time, and was rewarded with the satisfying crack of their windshield spiderwebbing. Then Dominic killed the lights and braked hard, sending them into a controlled slide that ended behind a concrete pillar. The SUV screamed past, momentum carrying them deeper into the structure. Dominic reversed, spun the wheel, and was heading back up before their pursuers could react. They emerged into daylight, merged with traffic, and disappeared into Boston's tangle of one-way streets and confused tourists. 10 minutes later, Dominic pulled into another parking garage. Different structure, different neighborhood, no pursuit visible. He killed the engine and sat there, both hands on the wheel, breathing hard. This is my life, he said quietly. Car chases and gunfights, and constantly running from people who want me dead. You sure you want to stay married to this? Serafina was still holding the gun, adrenaline making her hands shake. Ask me again when I'm not high on near-death experience. I'm serious. So am I. She set the gun down carefully. Your sister just betrayed you to federal agents. Your lawyer is playing every side against each other. The Eastern Syndicate wants you dead, the feds want you in prison, and your entire empire is collapsing. So maybe stop asking if I'm sure and start figuring out how we survive the next 24 hours. He turned to look at her, really look at her, and she saw the exact moment he made his decision. There's one person who can help us.
Someone with resources, connections, and enough power to stand against the Eastern Syndicate. His jaw tightened. But going to him means admitting weakness, means owing a debt I can never repay, means putting you in danger that makes everything so far look like a practice run. Who? Antonio Marchese, Boston's Ghost King, the man every criminal family fears and nobody acknowledges exists. Dominic's voice dropped. He's been operating in this city for 40 years without a single arrest, a single public appearance, a single photograph. Law enforcement pretends he's a myth. Criminals know better. And you think he'll help us? I think he'll enjoy watching me beg. Then he'll make me an offer designed to destroy me in new and creative ways. He started the engine again. But it's the only move we have left. They drove in silence through streets that felt increasingly hostile, every shadow potentially hiding threats, every car a possible tale. Serafina watched the city slide past and tried not to think about how completely her life had transformed in less than a week. From diner waitress to mafia wife to federal target to... what? Whatever came next, it wouldn't be normal, wouldn't be safe, wouldn't be anything remotely resembling the life she'd been living before two men in charcoal coats knocked on her door. "I'm sorry," Dominic said suddenly. "For?" "All of it. Marrying you to settle a debt, dragging you into my war, getting you shot at repeatedly, turning you into exactly the kind of person I swore I'd protect people from becoming." His hands flexed on the wheel. "You deserved better than this." "Maybe. But this is what I've got, so I'm making it work." She reached over, put her hand on his. "Besides, I shot at people today. Disarmed a syndicate killer yesterday. Lied to federal prosecutors this morning. I think I'm already past the point of deserving better. You could still walk away. I'd help you disappear, set you up somewhere safe. Stop offering me exits I'm not going to take." She squeezed his hand. "I chose to stay. I chose to help. I chose you. So stop trying to protect me from consequences I've already accepted." He lifted her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles gently. "You're terrifying, you know that?" "Good. Someone needs to scare you besides the Eastern Syndicate." They pulled up to what looked like an abandoned textile factory on the waterfront, brick and broken windows and that particular smell of industrial decay. No guards visible, no signs of life, just emptiness that felt staged, deliberate, like a trap waiting to be sprung. "This is where we meet Marchese?" Serafina kept her voice low. "This is where everyone meets Marchese. He doesn't come to you. You come to him. Walk through his territory unarmed and vulnerable and hope he's in a merciful mood. And if he's not?" Dominic's smile was grim. "Then we become another urban legend about people who disappeared into this building and were never seen again." They got out of the car, moved toward the factory entrance. The door opened before they reached it, swinging inward with a creak that sounded like a horror movie soundtrack. Beyond was darkness that seemed to swallow light. Dominic took her hand. "Stay close. Don't speak unless spoken to. And whatever Marchese offers, let me negotiate. He likes games, and amateurs don't usually survive them." They stepped into the darkness together. The factory interior was a cathedral of rust and shadows, machinery looming like the skeletons of industrial gods. Their footsteps echoed off concrete and steel. Somewhere in the distance, water dripped with metronomic precision. "Dominic Virelli." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, smooth as aged whiskey. "I was wondering when you'd finally come asking for help." A light clicked on, single bulb hanging from a chain, illuminating a circle of floor in the factory's center. Standing in that circle was a man who looked nothing like Serafina expected. Mid-60s, gray hair, wearing a cardigan and reading glasses like someone's grandfather. But his eyes were chips of black ice that had seen too much death to ever be warm again. "Marchese," Dominic's voice was carefully respectful. "Thank you for seeing us. Did I have a choice? You drove into my territory, bleeding desperation like an open wound." Marchese's gaze slid to Serafina. "And this must be the wife. The girl who disarmed Marcus Webb with her bare hands. Impressive. Stupid, but impressive. She's under my protection." "Everyone's under someone's protection until they're not." Marchese moved closer, circling them like a shark. "But let's discuss why you're really here. Your empire is collapsing. Your sister turned informant. Your lawyer is playing every side against each other. The Eastern Syndicate wants you dead. The federal government wants you in prison, and you've come to me looking for a miracle. I came looking for an alliance.
No. You came looking for salvation. There's a difference. Marchese stopped in front of them. I can give you what you need, protection from the Eastern Syndicate, lawyers who can actually keep you out of prison, resources to rebuild your operation, even help retrieving your foolish sister before she destroys what's left of your family name. In exchange for everything. Marchese's smile was a knife edge. Your territory, your operations, your absolute loyalty. You become mine, Dominic. Not a partner, not an ally. My subordinate, my weapon, my property. You do what I say when I say it, for as long as I decide you're useful. That's not an alliance, that's surrender. That's survival. Marchese turned his attention back to Serafina. Or I could make you a different offer. One where the girl walks away free, protected, set up with a new life far from this nightmare. All she has to do is divorce you and testify that you forced her into the marriage through coercion and threats. The floor dropped out from under Serafina's world. What? It's simple. Your testimony puts Dominic away for years. Domestic violence, human trafficking, coercion, the charges practically write themselves. The feds get their conviction. You get your freedom. And I get everything Dominic built without having to negotiate with someone too stubborn to know when he's beaten. Marchese pulled out a business card, offered it to her. Think about it. Doors open for 72 hours. After that, the offer expires and you go down with him. Serafina stared at the card like it was a live snake. Beside her, Dominic had gone very still, face carved from ice. She won't take it, he said. Won't she? She's already lied to federal prosecutors for you, already shot at people, already become an accomplice to more crimes than she can probably count. How much longer before she realizes she's destroying herself to save a man she barely knows? Marchese's voice was almost gentle. Take the card, girl. Save yourself while you still can. Her hand moved on its own, fingers closing around the card. Dominic's expression didn't change, but she felt him tense beside her, felt the wall going up between them, brick by brick. Serafina. His voice was flat. You don't have to... Shut up. She looked at the card, at Marchese's knowing smile, at the exit just visible in the shadows. Freedom was right there. Safety. A life where she didn't wake up to gunfire and betrayal and the constant certainty that tomorrow might not come. She thought about her father, who'd chosen himself over her without hesitation. She thought about Celeste, who'd chosen the feds over family because trust had been broken. She thought about standing in front of federal prosecutors, lying through her teeth to protect a man who'd accused his own sister of treason. Then she tore the card in half and let the pieces fall to the concrete. I'm not leaving him, she said. Not for freedom, not for safety, not for anything you're offering. She looked at Marchese. So make your real offer, the one where we both walk out of here, because I know you didn't bring us here just to watch me choose sides. Marchese laughed, genuine, delighted, the sound echoing through the factory like cathedral bells. Oh, I like you. You're exactly the kind of dangerous I appreciate in my associates. He turned back to Dominic. Your wife has more spine than half my lieutenants. Congratulations. You accidentally married someone worth keeping. Does that mean you'll help us? It means I'll consider it. But first, you need to do something for me. Marchese pulled out a folder, handed it to Dominic. Info is everything you need to know about Vincent's true allegiances. Turns out your lawyer has been playing more than just feds and criminals. He's been working with a cartel out of Mexico City, setting up the pieces to take over Boston's entire criminal infrastructure once you and the Eastern Syndicate destroy each other. Dominic flipped through the folder, face darkening with every page. This is treason, ambition, inevitability. Pick your favorite. Marchese's voice hardened. Vincent wants your empire. The cartel wants a foothold in Boston. The Eastern Syndicate wants you dead. And I want to make sure that when the dust settles, my city doesn't get carved up by foreign interests. So here's what happens next. You take this information, you eliminate Vincent before he eliminates you, and you prove to me that you're still dangerous enough to be worth keeping alive. You want me to kill my own lawyer. I want you to kill the traitor who's been destroying you from inside while pretending to defend you. There's a difference. Marchese headed toward the shadows. You have 48 hours. After that, Vincent makes his move. The cartel floods my city with product and violence, and I'm forced to clean up a mess that could have been prevented. Don't disappoint me, Dominic. I hate cleaning up messes. He disappeared into the darkness, leaving them alone in the circle of light with a folder full of evidence and an execution order disguised as advice. Serafina looked at Dominic. You're not actually going to...
Yes. His voice was hollow.
Because Marchese's right. Vincent has been orchestrating this entire nightmare, and if I don't stop him, he wins. The cartel wins. Everyone who's ever underestimated me wins. And I can't... He stopped, jaw working. I can't let that happen. Not after everything. So you become a murderer. I already am a murderer, Serafina. The only question is whether I'm a murderer who survives or one who ends up in a shallow grave. He closed the folder. Let's go. We have planning to do. They walked back through the factory, through darkness that pressed in from all sides, and emerged into daylight that felt too bright, too normal for what they were about to do. In the car, Serafina sat silent while Dominic drove, her mind spinning through implications and consequences. She'd chosen to stay, chosen to be complicit, and now she was about to be an accessory to premeditated murder because that's what survival looked like in a world where everyone betrayed everyone and trust was currency nobody could afford. I'm sorry, Dominic said again. Stop apologizing. We're past that now. What are we then? She thought about it, about bullets and blood and the feeling of his hand in hers while the world burned around them. About the moment she'd torn up Marchese's card and chosen partnership over freedom. We're whatever comes after sorry, she said finally. Whatever that looks like. He reached over, took her hand. I need you to know something. After this is over, after Vincent, after the Eastern Syndicate, after all of it, you can still leave. I'll honor our contract, get you set up somewhere safe, make sure you never have to see me or this life again. And if I don't want to leave, then God help us both, because what comes next is going to make everything so far look gentle. They drove back into the city, two people bound by marriage and violence and choices that couldn't be unmade, heading toward a confrontation that would either save them or destroy them completely. Behind them, in a factory that officially didn't exist, Antonio Marchese watched security footage of their departure and smiled. She chose him, he said to someone in the shadows, even knowing what it would cost. That's either true love or true insanity. Does it matter which? A voice responded. Not really. Either way, they're about to become very useful. He switched off the monitor. Make sure they survive the next 48 hours. I have plans for Dominic Varelli and his dangerous little wife, and those plans require them both alive. And if they don't survive? Marchese's smile turned cold. Then we find someone else to clean up Boston's mess. There's always someone desperate enough to do the dirty work, as long as you promise them enough at the end. The monitor went dark, and with it, any illusion that Serafina and Dominic were making their own choices. They were pieces on a board they couldn't see, playing a game whose rules kept changing, and the only certainty was that before this ended, both of them would be forced to become something they'd never intended. The question was whether they'd recognize themselves when it was over, or whether the people who walked away would be strangers wearing familiar faces, hollowed out by survival, and filled with nothing but the kind of darkness that never quite washed clean. Vincent's office was in a high-rise downtown, all glass and steel and the kind of sterile corporate aesthetic that made criminality look like legitimate business. Dominic sat in the parking garage 3 levels below, engine off, watching security camera feeds on a tablet, while Serafina checked the magazine on a weapon she was still getting used to carrying. He's alone, Dominic said, voice flat. Security detail left 20 minutes ago. Office staff gone for the night. It's just him up there, probably celebrating how clever he's been. You sure about this? She wasn't questioning the plan, just making sure he'd counted the cost. No, but I'm sure about what happens if I don't. He looked at her, and the exhaustion in his eyes was bottomless. Last chance to wait in the car. You don't need to see this. Yes, I do. She chambered around, the sound sharp in the enclosed space. Because if we're doing this, we're doing it together. No more protecting me from reality. His smile was knife-thin. You're going to make me a better person or get us both killed trying, aren't you? Probably both. They took the service elevator, rising through floors of empty offices where fluorescent lights hummed like dying insects. Dominic had a key card, probably stolen, possibly bought, definitely illegal. It got them past 3 security checkpoints without triggering alarms. When they reached the 42nd floor, Vincent's private office level, the silence felt oppressive enough to suffocate. "He knows we're coming," Serafina whispered. "Of course he does. This entire setup is designed to make us think we have the advantage while he controls every variable." Dominic moved down the hallway, weapon ready. "But knowing and stopping are different things. And right now he thinks I'm too wounded, too desperate, too stupid to see the real trap." "What real trap?" "The one where he lets me kill him, becomes a martyr for the feds, and triggers contingency plans that destroy me posthumously." He stopped outside a door marked with Vincent's name in brass letters. "So we're not going to kill him. We're going to make him confess everything on camera, then let Marchese decide what happens next." "That's the plan? Make a lawyer confess?" "That's the plan." He kicked the door open. Vincent was sitting behind his desk, looking remarkably calm for a man about to be confronted by someone he'd been systematically betraying for months. Mid-50s, silver hair, expensive suit, hands folded on the polished wood like he was conducting a normal business meeting. "Dominic, Mrs. Varelli, I was wondering how long it would take you to figure it out." His voice was smooth, untroubled. "Please, come in. Close the door. We have so much to discuss." Dominic's weapon was aimed center mass, finger resting on the trigger guard. "Start talking. The cartel, the feds, the Eastern Syndicate. I want to know exactly how deep your betrayal goes." Betrayal. Vincent tasted the word. Such a loaded term. I prefer strategic repositioning. You were drowning, Dominic. Your empire was already collapsing under federal pressure and rival encroachment. I simply accelerated the timeline while ensuring the pieces fell in the right places. By feeding information to everyone and playing us all against each other. By creating chaos that allowed for necessary restructuring. Boston's criminal infrastructure was outdated, inefficient, controlled by families more interested in tradition than profit. Someone needed to modernize it. He smiled. I volunteered. Serafina moved to the side, giving herself a clear angle while staying out of Dominic's line of fire. "And the cartel? You sold out your own client to foreign interests?" "I aligned myself with people who understand that business is business, not personal vendettas disguised as honor codes." Vincent's eyes flicked to her. "You should understand that, Mrs. Varelli. You married a man you didn't know to save a father who didn't deserve it. That's not loyalty. That's transaction. Same thing I've been doing, just with better lawyers." "Where's the confession device?" Dominic asked quietly. "What?" "The audio recorder, the video feed, whatever system you have running to document this conversation for your cartel friends. Because I know you, Vincent. You document everything. It's how you've stayed valuable, by keeping enough evidence to bury everyone if they ever turn on you." Vincent's smile widened. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for." "Where is it?" "Everywhere." Vincent gestured broadly. "This entire office is wired. 4 cameras, 6 microphones, live feed uploading to 3 separate servers. You came here to make me confess, but really you're just providing evidence of witness intimidation and conspiracy to commit murder that'll put you away for life." Dominic's jaw tightened. "Then I guess I have nothing to lose." He pulled the trigger. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space, but it wasn't aimed at Vincent. The bullet shattered a painting on the wall, revealing the camera hidden behind it. Dominic moved methodically, firing 3 more shots that destroyed visible recording equipment with precision that came from years of knowing exactly where surveillance tech hid. Vincent was on his feet, hands up, backing toward the windows. "You're insane! That footage is already uploaded. Destroying the equipment doesn't matter if the footage shows you confessing to crimes that make my charges look like jaywalking." Dominic tossed the weapon to Serafina, who caught it on instinct. "Keep him covered. He moves. Shoot him somewhere painful, but non-lethal." "What are you doing?" Vincent's composure was finally cracking. "Improvising." Dominic moved to Vincent's computer, fingers flying over the keyboard. "You're right that I'm not the technical genius here, but I know someone who is. Someone who's been sitting in federal custody for the past 48 hours with nothing to do but think about how badly her brother screwed up." "Celeste," Vincent laughed. "Your sister hates you. She's giving the feds everything. She's stalling them while I fix my mistake." Dominic kept typing. "And right now, she's remotely accessing your servers through the back door you stupidly left open Because you never thought anyone would be smart enough to find it. Say hello, sister. A voice crackled through the computer speakers. Celeste, sounding exhausted but viciously satisfied. Hello, Vincent. I'm currently downloading 17 months of communications between you and the Guerrero cartel, including orders to assassinate 4 Boston crime bosses, instructions for coordinating federal raids on Dominic's operations, and a truly fascinating contract where they agree to pay you $12 million once you successfully take over Boston's criminal infrastructure. Vincent's face went gray. That's privileged attorney-client communication. Inadmissible in court, but perfect for Antonio Marchese's purposes. Dominic straightened. He doesn't care about courts. He cares about loyalty, and you just proved you have none. How long do you think you'll survive once he knows you've been selling Boston to a Mexican cartel? You can't. Marchese will kill me. That's the idea. Dominic moved closer, and the cold violence in his eyes was terrifying. You destroyed my organization, turned my sister into a federal informant, orchestrated assassination attempts on my wife, and did it all while billing me for legal services. So yes, Vincent, I'm going to let Marchese kill you slowly. But first, you're going to tell the feds everything about the cartel's operations, give them enough evidence to dismantle the entire network, and pray that cooperative witnesses get better treatment than traitors. I won't. Dominic grabbed him by the throat, slammed him against the window hard enough to crack glass. 42 stories below, the city glittered like broken promises. You will, because the alternative is me throwing you through this window right now, and at least cooperating gives you a chance to survive the next week. Vincent's eyes were bulging, face turning red. Dominic held him there for 5 seconds that felt eternal, then released him. Vincent collapsed, gasping, terror finally overwhelming calculation. I'll talk, he wheezed. I'll give them everything. Just keep me away from Marchese. That's not my problem. Dominic pulled out his phone, made a call. Marchese? I have a gift for you. Vincent Chen, my former lawyer, currently in possession of enough evidence to start a war between the Guerrero cartel and every family in Boston. I'm sure you'll want to have a conversation with him about loyalty and consequences. He hung up, looked at Serafina. We're leaving. Vincent's about to have visitors who aren't interested in his explanations. They were halfway to the elevator when Vincent screamed. Not pain, not yet. Fear, pure animal terror of someone who just realized they'd gambled wrong and lost everything. Serafina glanced back, saw shadows moving in Vincent's office. Figures in dark clothes, faces covered, moving with the efficiency of people who'd done this countless times before. Marchese's cleanup crew, here to collect their pound of flesh and send a message about what happened to traitors. Don't look, Dominic said, pulling her into the elevator. Trust me, you don't want those images in your head. The doors closed on Vincent screaming. They descended in silence, broken only by the mechanical hum of the elevator and Serafina's ragged breathing. When they hit the garage level, she stumbled out and threw up against a concrete pillar, her body rejecting everything they'd just done. Dominic held her hair back, waited until the heaving stopped. I'm sorry, you shouldn't have had to see. Stop apologizing. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. I chose to be here. I chose to help. That means I don't get to be horrified by the consequences. You should be. I am. Are you? She straightened, looked at him. Because you seemed pretty comfortable throwing him against windows and calling in execution squads. I've had 15 years to get comfortable with things that should horrify me. His voice was hollow. That's what this life does. It takes the person you were and replaces them piece by piece until you don't recognize yourself anymore. Then why do it? Why stay in a world that destroys you? Because the alternative is letting innocent people get destroyed instead. My sister, my employees, the families who depend on my protection. He moved toward their car. And now you. Whether I wanted it or not, you're part of this, which means I protect you or I'm no better than the monsters I fight. They drove through streets that felt surreal in their normalcy, people walking dogs, late-night diners glowing with warm light, couples laughing outside bars. The world kept spinning like they hadn't just sentenced a man to death, like violence was something that only happened on TV screens and in distant cities. Where are we going? Serafina asked. FBI field office. Celeste just bought herself a get-out-of-jail-free card by hacking Vincent's servers, But she needs extraction before the feds figure out she's been playing them. We get her out, we disappear for a few days while Marchese cleans up the mess, then we figure out what's left of my empire and whether it's worth saving. And the Eastern Syndicate? Marchese's problem now. Part of our deal, he handles my external threats while I rebuild internally, assuming there's anything left to rebuild. He pulled into an underground parking structure across from the FBI building. You ready for this? Because extraction from federal custody makes everything else tonight look simple. How are we even? Her question was cut off by Dominic's phone buzzing. He answered, listened, and his face went very still. When? Pause. How many? Another pause, longer this time. Understood. We're on our way. He hung up, started the engine, peeled out so fast the tires screamed. What happened? Eastern Syndicate just hit the FBI field office. Full assault, explosives, automatic weapons, coordinated attack designed to extract everyone in federal custody before they can testify. Celeste is in there, along with 3 of my captains and approximately 40 federal agents who are about to die if someone doesn't stop this. That's insane. They're attacking a federal building? They're desperate. Marchese moved against them faster than they expected, cutting off supply lines and freezing accounts. This is their Hail Mary. Break out their people, kill witnesses, and burn everything on their way down. He was driving like the devil himself was chasing them, weaving through traffic, running lights. Which means we're walking into a war zone to save my sister from people who want all of us dead. We don't have backup. We don't have a plan. We barely have weapons. I know. His voice was steel. But she's my sister, and I already destroyed our relationship once this week. I'm not letting her die alone thinking I abandoned her. They arrived to chaos. The FBI building was burning, smoke pouring from shattered windows, while gunfire echoed through streets that looked like a war zone. Bodies, agents, civilians, attackers littered the ground while sirens wailed from every direction, and news helicopters circled overhead like mechanical vultures. Dominic parked 3 blocks away, killed the engine. There's a service entrance on the east side. If Celeste is still alive, she'll be heading there. It's our old evacuation protocol from when we were kids. And if she's not there, then we find her body, and I live with that failure for whatever's left of my life. He checked his weapon, handed Serafina a spare magazine. Stay behind me. Watch the corners. If someone points a gun at you, shoot them first and feel guilty later. Understood? She nodded because words felt impossible. They moved through smoke and shadow, stepping over debris and avoiding pools of blood that reflected fire like crimson mirrors. The building's interior was worse, corridors torn apart by explosives, bodies in tactical gear and business suits, the smell of gunpowder and burning electronics. Celeste! Dominic's voice echoed through the destruction. Where are you? 3rd floor. Her voice, distant but strong. East stairwell. I have civilians. Gunfire cut off the rest. Dominic was moving before the echoes faded, taking stairs 3 at a time, while Serafina followed, lungs burning, weapon ready. They found Celeste on the 3rd floor landing, surrounded by 4 federal agents and pinned down by 3 Eastern Syndicate soldiers who'd taken position at the far end of the corridor. Celeste's face was cut, her jacket torn, but her eyes blazed with the same violent competence as her brother. About time. I've been keeping these people alive for 20 minutes. Where's your weapon? Out of ammunition. Been throwing furniture at them for the last 5 minutes. She grabbed a chunk of concrete, hurled it down the corridor. One of the Syndicate soldiers took it in the face, went down hard. 2 left. You take the one on the right. I'll figure out the other. Dominic was already firing, his shots precise despite the distance. The soldier on the right jerked, stumbled, went down. The remaining one returned fire, forcing them all behind cover while bullets chewed through drywall and concrete. Serafina saw the angle before anyone else. A side corridor that would give her a flanking position put her behind the shooter while he focused on Dominic and Celeste. It was stupid, reckless, exactly the kind of move that got people killed. She moved anyway, down the side corridor, stepping over bodies and debris, weapon up, trying to keep her breathing quiet while her heart hammered loud enough to give her away. The soldier was 10 feet ahead, focused entirely on suppressing Dominic and Celeste, not watching his 6. Amateur mistake. Even Serafina knew better now. She aimed for center mass like Dominic had taught her during their 3 hours of panicked firearms training in the warehouse. Squeezed the trigger smooth and steady. The recoil kicked harder than expected, but her shot was true. Caught him in the shoulder, spun him around. His weapon clattered across the floor. He lunged for it. She fired again, this time hitting his leg. He went down screaming, and Dominic was there instantly, disarming him with clinical efficiency before securing him with zip ties that appeared from nowhere. "Where's the rest of your team?" Dominic's voice was terrifyingly calm. "Go to hell!" Dominic put pressure on the leg wound. The soldier's scream echoed through the building. "Where?" "Fourth floor! They're extracting our people from holding cells. Supposed to meet at the roof for helicopter evac in 10 minutes. "How many?" 15, maybe 20. I don't know, they kept changing the numbers. Dominic stood, looked at the federal agents Celeste had been protecting. "Get these people out. Service exit on the east side, 3 blocks to the secondary command post. Move fast, stay low, don't stop for anything." "We can't leave you," one of them started. "Yes, you can. Your targets, we're ghosts. Go." Celeste was already shoving them toward the stairs. "And if you make it out, tell your superiors that Dominic Varelli saved your lives. Maybe they'll remember that when they're deciding whether to prosecute." The agents fled, leaving just the 3 of them in a corridor that smelled like death and burning plastic. Celeste turned to her brother. "We need to talk about trust issues when this is over." "I know. I'm sorry. I should have..." "Later. Right now, we have approximately 9 minutes before 15 Eastern Syndicate soldiers get airlifted out of here with enough witnesses and evidence to destroy what's left of Boston's criminal infrastructure." She grabbed a weapon from one of the downed soldiers, checked the magazine. "So what's the play?" "We stop them." Dominic looked at Serafina. "Which means you need to leave. This is going to get uglier than anything we've done tonight." "No." Her voice was steady despite the adrenaline shaking her hands. "I'm done being protected. Done sitting on the sidelines while you fight. You want to stop them? Fine. We stop them together." "Serafina, she's right." Celeste's smile was sharp. "Besides, she just flanked and disarmed a professional soldier. That's more tactical thinking than half your crew showed in the last firefight. Let her fight." Dominic looked between them, his sister, bloodied and fierce, and his wife, holding a weapon like she'd been born to it, and Serafina saw the moment he gave up trying to protect her from what she'd already become. "4th floor," he said. "We go up the back stairwell, hit them from the side while they're focused on securing their extraction point. Celeste, you take point. Serafina, you're with me. We move fast, shoot straight, and pray we survive the next 8 minutes." They moved through the building like hunting wolves, silent and deadly. The 4th floor was a maze of offices and holding cells, smoke making visibility terrible. Voices echoed from somewhere ahead, Eastern Syndicate soldiers shouting orders, prisoners being herded, the mechanical sound of doors being forced open. Dominic held up a fist. They stopped. He pointed to Celeste, then to a door on the left, pointed to himself and Serafina, then to a door on the right. Classic pincer movement, something they'd clearly done before. Celeste nodded, disappeared into smoke. Dominic grabbed Serafina's wrist, pulled her close. "When shooting starts, aim for legs and torsos. Avoid headshots. Too hard, too much room for error. If you run out of ammunition, find cover and stay down. Don't try to be a hero." "What if I want to be a hero?" "Then be a living one. Dead heroes don't help anyone." He kissed her forehead, quick and fierce. "Ready?" "No. Let's go anyway." They burst through the door into chaos. Eastern Syndicate soldiers had 3 federal prisoners zip-tied and were moving toward a stairwell that led to the roof. The soldiers spun, weapons coming up, and Dominic was already firing. 2 went down before they could return fire. Celeste hit them from the other side, taking out 2 more. Then everyone was shooting, and the world became thunder and smoke and the smell of cordite. Serafina found cover behind an overturned desk, returning fire when she saw targets, trying not to think about the fact that she was shooting at human beings who had families and histories and everything she'd once believed made life sacred. A soldier flanked her position. She pivoted, fired 3 times. He went down. Another tried to rush Dominic from behind. Celeste put a bullet through his knee, then his shoulder. He collapsed, screaming. The firefight lasted 30 seconds that felt like hours. When the smoke cleared, 7 Eastern Syndicate soldiers were down. The 3 prisoners were huddled against a wall looking traumatized, and Serafina's ears were ringing so loud she could barely hear Dominic shouting,
"A stairwell! They're going for the roof!" They ran, taking stairs so fast Serafina nearly fell twice. The roof access door was open, night air and helicopter noise pouring through. Dominic hit it first, Celeste right behind him, and Serafina emerged into wind and chaos. A helicopter hovered 10 feet above the roof line, rope ladder dangling. 8 Eastern Syndicate soldiers were on the roof, half of them already climbing toward extraction. When they saw Dominic, they opened fire. Concrete exploded around them. Celeste grabbed Serafina, pulled her behind an HVAC unit while Dominic returned fire. One soldier fell from the ladder, plummeting 40 stories to the street below. Another took a hit and collapsed on the roof. "We can't let that helicopter leave," Celeste was shouting over the rotor wash. "If they extract with those prisoners, everything we've done is worthless." "I know!" Dominic's weapon clicked empty. He dropped the magazine, loaded a spare. "Ideas?" Serafina looked at the helicopter, at the soldiers climbing desperately toward escape, at the chaos swirling around them. And she saw something nobody else had noticed. A fuel line, severed during the earlier explosions, leaking petroleum across the roof in a slow-spreading pool. She pulled out her phone, turned on the flashlight, aimed it at Dominic until he looked. She pointed at the fuel, then at his weapon, mimed shooting. Understanding dawned in his eyes. Horror followed immediately. "Serafina, no. The fire will spread to the entire building." "The building's already evacuated. Federal agents are out, civilians are out. Everyone left is either us or them." She had to scream to be heard. "If that helicopter leaves, they win. If it stays, we have a chance." He looked at the fuel line, at the helicopter, at his sister. Celeste nodded, face grim. "She's right. Do it." Dominic aimed at the fuel pool where it had spread closest to 3 soldiers trying to provide cover fire for the helicopter. "Everyone get back, way back." They retreated to the roof access stairwell. Dominic braced himself, took the shot. The roof exploded into flames. Fire raced across the petroleum spill, engulfing the 3 soldiers instantly. Their screams were terrible, brief, cut off as the flames spread to the helicopter's fuel tank. The aircraft lurched, pilot desperately trying to gain altitude while fire crawled up the landing skids. The Eastern Syndicate soldiers on the ladder made fatal decisions. Some jumped and died hitting the roof. Others held on and burned when the fire reached them. The helicopter made it 50 feet before the fuel tank ignited, turning the aircraft into a fireball that spiraled down, 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 finally crashing into an empty plaza 4 blocks away with an explosion that shook the building. Silence, broken only by flames crackling and Serafina's ragged breathing. The roof was an inferno, cutting off their route back through the building. "Celeste," Dominic grabbed his sister, checking for injuries. "You hit?" "No. You?" "Fine." "Serafina?" "Alive." Barely. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Did we just—" "Yes." His voice was hollow. "We just killed approximately 15 people and destroyed a federal building. So that's tonight's body count."
"Actually closer to 20 if you count Vincent's situation." Celeste moved to the roof edge, looking for escape routes. "And the building will survive. Fire department's already responding. But we need to leave. Now. Before federal agents arrive and arrest us for everything from arson to mass murder." "How?" "The stairwell's cut off, the elevator's destroyed, and we're 42 stories up." Celeste pointed to an adjacent building, maybe 15 feet away. "We jump." "You're insane." "No, I'm practical. That building has roof access. We jump, we get inside, we disappear before anyone connects us to this nightmare." She was already backing up, getting a running start. "Ladies first?" Serafina looked at the gap. 15 feet, maybe more. 400 feet straight down if she missed. Every rational cell in her body was screaming that this was suicide. She jumped anyway. Time stretched. The gap seemed to widen. Wind tore at her clothes. For one terrible instant, she thought she'd miscalculated, that gravity would win and she'd become another body in tonight's casualty count. Then her feet hit solid concrete and she was rolling, momentum carrying her across the adjacent roof while her brain caught up with the fact that she was alive. She'd made it. She just jumped between buildings like some kind of action movie character. Celeste landed beside her, graceful as a cat. Nice. Now you, brother. Dominic backed up, got his running start. The jump looked easier for him. Longer legs, more practice doing insane things to survive. He landed hard but controlled, rolled to his feet, and the three of them stood there on a burning rooftop while sirens wailed from every direction, and the city blazed around them like civilization itself was on fire. "We need to move," Celeste said. "Federal response will be here in minutes, and when they start analyzing footage, we're going to be on every watch list from here to California." They found roof access, descended through an office building that was mercifully empty and unaware of the war zone next door, hit the street level and emerged into crowds of onlookers, phones out, filming the burning FBI building like it was entertainment instead of nightmare made real. Dominic grabbed Serafina's hand, pulled her close. "Stay with me. Act like you belong. Just another civilian watching the disaster. Nothing suspicious." They walked 3 blocks before finding their car, untouched and waiting like a promise of escape. Dominic drove carefully now, obeying traffic laws, blending into the flow of vehicles fleeing the area. Nobody looked twice at them. Nobody suspected that the 3 exhausted people in business casual were responsible for approximately 20 deaths and the destruction of a federal building. They drove for an hour, changing directions, doubling back, making sure they weren't followed. Finally, Dominic pulled into a motel parking lot on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place that took cash and didn't ask questions. Inside the room, peeling wallpaper, sagging bed, television that probably predated color broadcasting, they collapsed. Celeste grabbed the bathroom first, emerged 20 minutes later looking more human. Dominic went next, leaving Serafina alone with her thoughts and the gradually fading adrenaline that had kept her moving. Her hands were shaking. She stared at them, at the gun residue on her fingers, at the small cuts from glass and concrete. These hands had killed tonight. Multiple people. She'd aimed and fired and watched human beings fall, and the worst part was how little she felt about it. No guilt, no horror. Just hollow exhaustion and the distant certainty that she'd crossed a line that didn't have a path back. When Dominic emerged, hair wet, wearing motel towels because their clothes were destroyed, he found her sitting on the bed staring at her hands. "Hey." He sat beside her. "You're in shock. It's normal after what we did." "I don't feel normal. I don't feel anything." Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. "I killed people tonight, Dominic. Multiple people. And I can't even remember their faces." "That's survival. Your brain protecting you from processing trauma in the moment." He took her hands, rubbed warmth back into fingers that had gone ice cold. "The guilt comes later, usually around 3 a.m. when you can't sleep and your mind replays every detail." "Does it get easier?" "No. You just get better at living with it." He pulled her close, and she let herself lean into him, let his warmth chase away some of the cold. "For what it's worth, you saved lives tonight. Federal agents, civilians, even Celeste and me. Those soldiers would have killed everyone in that building if you hadn't—" "Don't." She pulled back. "Don't justify it. Don't make it noble. I killed people to protect people, which makes me exactly like every other person in your world who's decided that violence is acceptable math." "Welcome to my nightmare." His smile was bitter. "Population. Everyone who's ever tried to survive in this city." Celeste knocked on the bathroom door frame. "Your turn, sister-in-law. Get cleaned up, get some sleep if you can. Tomorrow we deal with consequences, but tonight we're just 3 people who survived something we shouldn't have." Serafina showered until the water ran cold, scrubbing away blood and smoke and the residue of decisions she couldn't unmake. When she emerged, she found Dominic and Celeste sitting on opposite beds, talking in low voices that stopped when they saw her. "What?" she asked. "We were discussing next steps." Celeste's voice was careful. "Marchese will expect a report. Federal agents will be investigating. The Eastern Syndicate is effectively destroyed, which creates a power vacuum that every ambitious criminal in Boston will try to fill. And we need to decide if we're filling it or walking away." Dominic looked at her. "My empire is gone. Vincent destroyed it from the inside, the feds dismantled what was left,
And tonight we burned the bridges that might have led to rebuilding. So I'm asking you, both of you, what comes next?" Celeste laughed, sharp and exhausted.
"You're actually asking? Since when do you ask instead of command? Since I realized that commanding is what got us here. Maybe it's time to try something different." He stood, moved to the window, stared out at nothing. "I'm tired, Celeste. Tired of fighting wars I didn't start. Tired of watching good people get destroyed. Tired of being the monster everyone expects me to be." "So what? You want to walk away, become a civilian?" Celeste's voice dripped skepticism. "That's not how this works. You don't just retire from being Dominic Varelli. Maybe not, but I can stop being the version of me that destroys everything I touch." He turned back to face them. Marchese made an offer: work for him, become his subordinate, help him rebuild Boston's criminal infrastructure under his control. It's not freedom, but it's survival. And right now, survival sounds pretty good. "You'd work for someone else?" Serafina couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. "After 15 years of running your own empire? I'd work for someone who's smart enough to stay alive and powerful enough to protect the people I care about. That's not surrender. That's pragmatism." He looked at Celeste. "What about you? Federal custody didn't work out, obviously, but you could still disappear, new identity, new life, away from all of this. And leave you to screw up my legacy? Not a chance." Celeste's smile was fierce. "Besides, someone needs to keep you from making terrible decisions. Apparently that's my job now." They both looked at Serafina, waiting, giving her a choice that felt impossible. "I don't know who I am anymore," she said quietly. "A week ago, I was a waitress trying to save my father. Now I'm, what, a criminal? A murderer? A mafia wife who jumps between buildings and shoots people?" "You're a survivor," Dominic said. "Same as us. Same as everyone who's ever been backed into corners and decided living mattered more than staying clean. Is that enough? Just surviving? It has to be. Because the alternative is giving up, and I don't think any of us are built that way." Serafina thought about her father, about the man who'd raised her, then sold her out, then disappeared into witness protection without looking back. She thought about the life she'd had, small, simple, safe, and how completely it had been destroyed by choices other people made. Then she thought about Dominic bleeding on top of her while bullets flew, about Celeste laughing as they fought their way through a war zone, about the moment she'd torn up Marchese's card and chosen partnership over freedom. "I'm staying," she said, "not because I'm okay with what we did, not because I think this is right or good or anything except horrifying, but because walking away means letting you face consequences alone, and I'm apparently too stubborn or too broken to do that." Dominic crossed to her, cupped her face in both hands. "You're not broken. You're adapting. There's a difference." "Is there? Because I can't tell anymore." "There is. Trust me on this." He kissed her forehead, gentle despite everything. "We'll figure it out, together." A phone buzzed. Celeste checked it, face going hard. "It's Marchese. He wants a meeting. Tonight. Says he has information about your father, Serafina, and it can't wait." The room went cold. "My father?" Apparently he didn't stay in witness protection like he was supposed to. Marchese's people spotted him in Boston 2 hours ago, meeting with someone very interesting. Celeste showed them a photo, grainy surveillance footage of her father sitting in a car with someone whose face was obscured. "Marchese thinks he's planning something that involves all of us." Serafina stared at her father's face on the screen, feeling something dark and furious unfold in her chest. He'd sold her out, used her as bait, disappeared while she fought for her life. And now he was back, scheming something new, because apparently destroying her life once wasn't enough. "Where's the meeting?" Dominic asked. "Same place as last time, the factory, 1 hour." Celeste pocketed her phone. "What do you want to do?" Serafina looked at Dominic, at Celeste, at the motel room that represented the temporary safety they'd carved out of chaos. Then she looked at her father's face on Celeste's phone and made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff. "We go," she said. "We find out what he's planning, and then we end this. All of it. Tonight." "Serafina, no more running, no more reacting, no more letting him control my life from the shadows." Her voice was steel wrapped in rage. He started this when he stole from you. He escalated it when he married me off and disappeared. And now he's back for round 3? Fine. Let's finish it. Dominic studied her face, and whatever he saw there made him nod slowly. Okay, we finish it. But we do it smart. Marchese's factory, his territory, his rules. We walk in prepared for anything. I'm always prepared for anything now. She grabbed the weapon she'd been carrying all night, checked the magazine out of habit. That's what tonight taught me. Expect the worst, plan for worse than that, and survive anyway. Celeste's smile was proud and terrible. You're definitely a Varelli now. Welcome to the family, sister. They dressed in whatever clean clothes the motel vending machine and bathroom counter could provide. Mismatched, worn, but functional. Armed themselves with weapons scavenged from tonight's battles, and drove through the night toward Marchese's factory, toward whatever fresh nightmare waited there, toward the final confrontation with a man who'd destroyed his daughter trying to save himself. The factory loomed against the night sky like a monument to industrial decay. They parked, moved toward the entrance, and the door swung open before they reached it. Same as last time, invitation or trap, impossible to tell the difference. Inside, Marchese waited in his circle of light, still wearing that cardigan, still looking like someone's grandfather instead of Boston's Ghost King. But tonight, he wasn't alone. Serafina's father stood beside him, hands zip-tied behind his back, face bruised, terror written in every line of his body. And standing on Marchese's other side, looking smug and untouched, was a face that made Dominic go absolutely rigid. "Hello, nephew," the man said, voice smooth as aged whiskey. "It's been a long time." "Uncle Marco." Dominic's voice was flat. "You're supposed to be dead." "I was. Then I got better." Marco smiled, and it was the smile of someone who'd been planning this moment for years. "Surprised? You should be. This has been 15 years in the making, and tonight, finally, everything comes together." Marchese gestured to Serafina's father. "Mr. Vale has been very cooperative. He's explained exactly how you convinced his daughter to marry you, exactly how you've been using her as cover for your operations, exactly how you're responsible for tonight's attack on the FBI building that killed federal agents and innocent civilians." "That's a lie," Serafina started. Serafina, "Is it?" Marco moved forward. "Or is it the truth you've been too blinded by survival to see? My nephew is a monster, Mrs. Varelli. He's been manipulating you from the start, using your father's debt to trap you, using your loyalty to turn you into an accomplice. And tonight, finally, we're going to make him pay for every life he's destroyed." Dominic's hand found Serafina's, squeezed tight. "Whatever they told you, whatever they promised you, it's a lie. Your uncle is the man who helped me orchestrate your downfall," her father said, voice shaking. "I never stole from Dominic. Marco gave me that money, told me to make it look like theft, promised that if I played my part perfectly, we'd both be rich, and you'd be safe, baby girl. Safe from him." The floor seemed to drop away. Serafina looked at her father, at Marco, at Marchese's knowing smile, and felt the last pieces of the puzzle click into place with sickening clarity. This entire nightmare, from the moment 2 men knocked on her door to the fire on the roof tonight, had been orchestrated. A long game designed to destroy Dominic Varelli and everyone he cared about, using his own family and Serafina's father as weapons. "You sold me out," she whispered, looking at her father. "Not to save yourself, but to destroy him. Why?" "Because he killed your mother." The words landed like bullets. Serafina went numb, her hand slipping from Dominic's. "That's a lie," Dominic said, but his voice cracked. "Your mother died in a car accident, arranged by you." Marco's smile was vicious. 15 years ago, when you were consolidating power and eliminating rivals. Her husband, Serafina's father, had borrowed money from the wrong people. You wanted to send a message about debts and consequences. So you arranged a little accident, faulty brakes, sharp curve, long drop. Very tragic. "No." But Dominic's face had gone gray. "You ordered it. Maybe you didn't pull the trigger yourself, but you signed the execution order." And her father has been planning revenge ever since, waiting for the perfect moment to destroy you the way you destroyed his family. Marco moved closer. "So he came to me, your uncle, the man you thought you'd killed during your consolidation 15 years ago. And together, we built this beautiful trap. We made you fall for his daughter. We made her fall for you. We made you both complicit in so much violence that when the truth came out, there'd be nowhere left to run. Serafina looked at Dominic, saw the truth in his eyes. Horror, guilt, the terrible recognition of something he'd buried so deep he'd almost forgotten it himself. Tell me he's lying, she whispered. I can't. His voice was broken. I did terrible things 15 years ago. Things I've spent every day since trying to atone for. And your mother, she wasn't supposed to die. It was supposed to be a warning, a message to your father about paying debts. But the people I hired were sloppy, and she died, and by the time I found out what happened, it was too late to fix it. So you just, what? Forgot? Moved on? Married her daughter 16 years later without telling her you'd murdered her mother? I didn't know you were her daughter. I knew a man named Vale had lost his wife in a suspicious accident, but I didn't connect it to you until tonight, until Marco. He stopped, closed his eyes. God, I'm so sorry, Serafina. If you'd known, you wouldn't have married me, wouldn't have dragged me into your war, wouldn't have turned me into a killer. She was shaking, fury and grief warring in her chest. Or would you have done it anyway, because survival matters more than being human? I don't know. His voice broke completely. I don't know who I am anymore. I've been a monster so long, I don't remember how to be anything else. Then let me help you remember. Marco pulled a gun, aimed it at Dominic's head. You destroyed my family. You stole my empire. You became everything our father wanted, and I could never be. And now, finally, you're going to pay for all of it. Marco, wait. Marchese's voice, calm and controlled. We had an agreement. The nephew comes to me alive. I help you rebuild what he took. Plans change. Marco's finger tightened on the trigger. Some debts can only be paid in blood. Serafina moved without thinking, stepped between the gun and Dominic, arms spread wide, offering herself as a shield for the man who'd killed her mother. You want to kill him? Her voice was steady despite the terror screaming through her. Fine, but you go through me first, and then you explain to my father how his revenge plan ended with his daughter's death, how he became exactly like the monster he was trying to destroy. Her father made a choking sound. Baby, move, please. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You used me. Both of you. She looked at Marco, then at her father. You turned me into bait for a 15-year-old revenge plan. You married me off to a man you knew had killed my mother. You orchestrated every moment of the last week to break me and him and anyone caught in the crossfire. And you think that makes you the hero of this story? It makes me the survivor, her father said. Same as you. Same as everyone in this godforsaken city. No. Survivors adapt. You weaponized. There's a difference. She looked back at Dominic, saw him standing there with death in front of him and betrayal behind, and made the choice that would define the rest of her life. You killed my mother. You lied to me. You turned me into someone I don't recognize, and I should hate you for all of it. You should, he agreed quietly, but I don't. Because hate would mean giving up the last piece of myself that isn't broken. She turned back to Marco. So here's what happens next. You lower that weapon, you walk away, you let us leave, and tomorrow, or next week, or whenever we're all recovered enough to think straight, we figure out what justice looks like. But tonight nobody else dies. Marco laughed. That's not how this works, sweetheart. This ends in blood, his blood, or it doesn't end at all. Then it doesn't end. Serafina's voice was steel. Because I'm not moving, and you're not shooting through me to get to him. So we stand here until someone blinks, or until Marchese gets bored and has us all killed for wasting his time. The silence stretched so tight it could have broken the world. Marco's hand shook slightly, finger still on the trigger. Dominic stood frozen behind her, barely breathing. Her father was crying, quiet tears streaming down a face carved from guilt and exhaustion. Finally, Marchese spoke. Lower the weapon, Marco. The girl's right. This ends in negotiation or it ends with all of you dead, and honestly, I'm too tired to clean up that mess tonight. But lower the weapon. Marchese's voice dropped to something dangerous. Or I'll have my people lower it for you, along with your body temperature. Marco's hand dropped. The gun clattered to the concrete, and the tension in the room shifted from imminent violence to something more sustainable. Hatred, yes, but contained, survivable. Smart choice.
Marchese gestured, and figures emerged from the shadows, his cleanup crew, weapons ready, positioned to end this if anyone moved wrong. Now, let's discuss terms. Because you've all proven tonight that you're too dangerous to kill and too stupid to let run free. Which means you work for me, all of you. Dominic and his little family unit, Marco and his revenge fantasies, even Mr. Vale and his lies. You become my people, you follow my rules, and you channel all this delicious dysfunction into making me richer and Boston safer. And if we refuse, Dominic asked, then I kill Marco for attempting to murder you without my permission. I kill Mr. Vale for orchestrating federal raids on my business partners. And I kill you and your wife for burning down a federal building and destroying the Eastern Syndicate without consulting me first. Marchese's smile was terrifying. Fair warning, I don't bluff, so choose carefully. Serafina looked at Dominic, at the man who'd killed her mother, married her daughter, and somehow become the person she trusted most in a world gone mad. She should hate him, should walk away, take Marchese's offer, let Marco have his revenge. Instead, she took his hand and held on tight. We accept your terms, she said. All of us. Together. Because apparently we're too broken to do anything else. Marchese's smile widened. Excellent. Welcome to the family, Mrs. Varelli. I think you're going to fit in perfectly. The factory felt different in the aftermath of Marchese's ultimatum. The shadows were the same, the rust-scented air unchanged, but something fundamental had shifted in the space between accepting survival and choosing what kind of survival mattered. Serafina stood with Dominic's hand in hers, her father's tears still echoing in her ears, and Marco's hatred burning holes in her back. Before we proceed with formalities, Marchese said, settling into a chair that materialized from nowhere. His people were efficient like that. I believe some housekeeping is in order. Mr. Vale, your daughter has questions. Answer them honestly, or I'll have my associates encourage your honesty with tools nobody enjoys. Her father looked smaller than Serafina remembered. Not physically, the dimensions were the same, but diminished somehow, like guilt had hollowed him out from the inside. He wouldn't meet her eyes. I loved your mother, he said finally. That's the truth nobody wants to hear. I loved her, and I got her killed through my own stupidity and greed. The debt I owed, it wasn't to Dominic directly. It was to one of his captains, a man who operated with the kind of brutality that made even other criminals uncomfortable. When I couldn't pay, they came for leverage. Your mother was supposed to be scared, not dead. A warning, not an execution. But she died anyway. Serafina's voice was flat. She died anyway. He finally looked up, and the devastation in his eyes was almost unbearable. And I spent 16 years drowning in that guilt while you grew up without her. Then Marco found me 2 years ago. Told me Dominic had given the order, that he was the architect of the nightmare that destroyed our family. Offered me a chance at justice if I was willing to play the long game. So you stole from Dominic, created a debt that forced me into marriage. Used me as bait. Each word tasted like broken glass. I thought I was saving you. Marco promised that once Dominic was destroyed, you'd be free. Protected. That the marriage would be annulled and you'd walk away clean. His laugh was bitter. I was stupid enough to believe him. You were desperate enough to believe him, Marchese corrected. There's a difference. Desperation makes people do extraordinary things. Build empires, destroy them, sacrifice their daughters on altars made of revenge. It's quite poetic, really, in a tragic sort of way. Marco was pacing the perimeter of the light like a caged animal. He agreed to the plan, recorded conversations, fed information to the feds, even convinced his own daughter to marry the man who killed his wife. That takes commitment. That takes delusion, Celeste interjected. She'd been silent until now, watching everything with the calculating intensity of someone mapping exit strategies. You really thought Dominic wouldn't figure it out? That he'd just collapse under the weight of your scheme without fighting back? I thought he'd be too distracted by federal investigations and syndicate wars to see the pattern. I underestimated how much his sister loves him. Marco's smile was razor-edged, and I definitely underestimated how quickly the wife would go from victim to accomplice. I'm not an accomplice, Serafina's voice cut through the tension. I'm a survivor. And there's a difference between doing terrible things because you choose to and doing them because every other option is worse. Is there? Marco moved closer, and Dominic tensed beside her. Because from where I'm standing, you've killed people, burned buildings,
destroyed evidence. You're just as guilty as my nephew. You've just had less time to rationalize it into something noble. Maybe, but I'm not the one who spent 15 years planning to murder someone. She met his eyes without flinching. You want to talk about guilt? Fine. I'm guilty. Dominic's guilty. My father's guilty. Every person in this factory is guilty of something that would put them in prison for life. But at least we're honest about what we've become. You're still pretending revenge is the same as justice. The silence that followed was sharp enough to draw blood. Marco's face went through several expressions: rage, recognition, something that might have been shame if he'd had any left. You don't know what you're talking about, he said finally. Don't I? My mother died because of violence that had nothing to do with her. Your empire died because Dominic was better at survival than you were. We're both casualties of a world that eats people alive and calls it business. The only difference is I'm trying to live with it instead of feeding more bodies to the machine. Marchese slow clapped, the sound echoing through the factory. Magnificent. Mrs. Varelli, you have a talent for cutting through nonsense that I find genuinely refreshing. Most people in your position would be begging for mercy or promising cooperation. You're lecturing us about moral philosophy. I'm telling the truth. That's different. Not in my experience. He stood, moved into the center of their circle. But since we're being honest, let me tell you what happens next. Dominic, you owe me for the protection I've extended, for eliminating Vincent, for allowing you to survive this long. That debt will be paid through service. You become my right hand, handle operations I don't want traced back to me, and prove you're still dangerous enough to be useful. Dominic nodded slowly. Terms? Negotiable. But you work for me until I say otherwise, and your wife comes as part of the package. I'm curious to see what someone with her particular skill set can accomplish with proper resources. And Marco? Marco gets one chance to prove he's more valuable alive than dead. He has networks in territories I've been trying to penetrate for years. He uses those networks for my benefit, or I let Dominic settle their family drama permanently. Marchese turned to her father. As for you, Mr. Vale, you're going to disappear again. Proper witness protection this time, far from Boston, with instructions never to contact your daughter again. Consider it mercy for the grief you've already caused her. No. The word came out before Serafina fully processed what she was saying. He stays. Every head swiveled toward her. Dominic's hand tightened on hers in warning, but she pushed forward anyway. He stays? He testifies against the cartel operations Vincent was coordinating, and he spends whatever's left of his life trying to atone for the damage he's done. Sending him away just lets him hide from consequences. I want him here, where I can see him, where he has to look me in the eye every day and remember what he cost us. Her father made a sound like something breaking. Sarah, I don't want your excuses. I don't want your apologies. I want you to live with what you did, the same way I'm going to live with what I've become because of you. She looked at Marchese. Can you arrange that? I can arrange anything, my dear. The question is whether your husband agrees to have the man who orchestrated his downfall living under his protection. All eyes shifted to Dominic. He stood there, face carved from exhaustion and something that looked almost like relief, staring at the man who'd recorded his conversations, betrayed his trust, and nearly destroyed everything he'd built. He stays, Dominic said finally, on one condition. He tells me everything. Every conversation with Marco, every plan, every piece of information he gave to federal prosecutors. I want to know exactly how deep this goes and who else was involved. You'll have it? Her father's voice was barely audible. All of it. Every detail. It's the least I owe you both. You owe us a hell of a lot more than details, Celeste said. But it's a start. Marchese clapped his hands together. Excellent. Then we have our arrangement. Dominic and his expanding family work for me. Marco operates under my supervision. Mr. Vale provides testimony and intelligence, and I continue running Boston while everyone else does the actual bleeding. He moved toward the shadows. One more thing. The federal investigation into tonight's events will conclude that the Eastern Syndicate attacked the FBI building as a desperate final move before their network collapsed. Several brave agents gave their lives defending civilians. Dominic Varelli was nowhere near the scene. Is that story clear to everyone? A chorus of agreement. Marchese nodded, satisfied, and disappeared into darkness with his entourage, leaving the five of them standing in a circle of light, that felt less like sanctuary and more like the eye of a storm that would never fully pass. Marco left next, escorted by two of Marchese's people, who would make sure he actually reported to his new assignment instead of fleeing the city. He paused at the edge of the light, looked back at Dominic.
"I really did want to kill you," he said. "For 15 years, it's the only thing that kept me alive, and now I don't even get that." "No. You get to survive and work for someone else. Welcome to my world, Uncle. Population, everyone who's too stubborn to die and too broken to live properly." Marco's laugh was hollow. "We really are family, aren't we?"
Unfortunately. Then he was gone, and it was just Serafina, Dominic, Celeste, and her father standing in the ruins of their various betrayals, trying to figure out how to build something from the wreckage. "I need air," Celeste said suddenly. "This whole situation is suffocating, and I've spent enough time in enclosed spaces with emotional disasters to last a lifetime." She looked at Serafina. "You good here? Or do you need extraction from the men who destroyed your life?"
"I'm good, I think." Serafina wasn't sure of anything except that walking away felt impossible. "Thank you for everything tonight." "Thank me by surviving. That's the best any of us can hope for." Celeste headed for the door, paused. "For what it's worth, you're exactly the kind of dangerous my brother needed. Try not to get him killed while you're figuring out if you can actually stand him." Then she was gone too, and the factory felt enormous and empty with just the three of them. Serafina's father broke the silence. "I should go. Give you two space to process everything." "No." Dominic's voice was quiet but firm. "You should stay. We need to have this conversation, all of us, while the wounds are still fresh. Because if we leave this for later, it'll fester into something that destroys us worse than honesty ever could."
They found themselves sitting on the concrete floor, too exhausted to stand, forming a triangle of wary gazes and unspoken accusations. The single bulb swayed slightly overhead, casting moving shadows that made everyone look haunted. "I killed your wife," Dominic said, looking at Serafina's father. "Not directly, not intentionally, but I gave the order that set events in motion, and she died because of choices I made. Nothing I say or do will change that. No, it won't." Her father's voice was rough, "and I've spent 16 years hating you for it, even though I didn't know your name until 2 years ago. I hated the system that killed her, the violence, the casual way this city treats human life like currency. When Marco told me you were the one who ordered it, it gave my hate a target. Did it help? Having someone to blame? For a while. Then it just made everything worse, because hate's exhausting when you carry it long enough. It eats you from the inside until there's nothing left but the desire to hurt someone the way you've been hurt." He looked at Serafina. "I'm sorry. For all of it. For using you. For lying to you. For turning you into something you never wanted to be. If I could take it back..." "You can't. None of us can." Serafina wrapped her arms around her knees. "So we stop talking about what we'd change and start figuring out how to live with what actually happened." "How?" Her father's voice cracked. "How do I live knowing I destroyed my daughter's life the same way the city destroyed my wife's? The same way I live knowing I killed your wife. The same way Serafina lives knowing she killed people tonight." Dominic stared at his hands, scarred, bloody, shaking slightly. "You wake up, you breathe, you do one decent thing to balance out the terrible things. And you hope that eventually the scale tips far enough that you can sleep without nightmares. Does it work?" "Not yet, but I've been trying for 15 years, so maybe another 15 will do it." They sat in silence, broken only by distant sirens. Always sirens in this city, always someone bleeding, always someone running from consequences that moved faster than escape. Serafina thought about her mother, about the woman she'd never known well enough, who died because violence was currency and debts were paid in blood. "Tell me about her," she said suddenly. "My mother. What was she like?" Her father's face crumpled. She was everything good I wasn't. Patient when I was reckless. Careful when I was destructive. She saw the best in people even when they showed her their worst." He smiled through tears. "She would have hated what we've all become. The violence, the lies, the way we've let this city turn us into versions of ourselves she wouldn't recognize. Then maybe we honor her by trying to be better." Serafina looked between them. "Not perfect, not clean,
Just less terrible than we were yesterday. That's a low bar, Dominic said. It's the only one I can reach right now.
He laughed, sharp and exhausted, and pulled her close. She let herself lean into him, into the warmth of someone who'd killed her mother, and somehow become the person she trusted most. The contradiction didn't make sense, wouldn't make sense, but sense was a luxury for people who hadn't spent a week becoming someone they didn't recognize. "We should leave," her father said quietly, "before someone decides our arrangement isn't convenient anymore." They drove through streets that were starting to show signs of dawn, sky going from black to navy to that particular purple that meant morning was coming whether anyone was ready or not. Dominic drove, Serafina in the passenger seat, her father in the back like a prisoner or a passenger, impossible to tell which. They ended up at a different safe house. This one, an apartment in a neighborhood expensive enough that police response times were measured in minutes instead of hours. Clean, modern, soulless in the way temporary spaces always were. Her father disappeared into one bedroom, exhaustion finally overcoming everything else. Serafina and Dominic stood in the living room, looking at each other across 3 feet that might as well have been miles. "You should hate me," he said. "I know. You should walk away, take Marchese's protection, build a life that doesn't include the man who destroyed your family." "I know that too. So why are you still here?" She thought about it, about bullets and blood, and the moment she'd stepped between him and Marco's gun, about choosing partnership over freedom, survival over sense, him over everything her rational mind said was right. "Because hate is easy," she said finally. "Walking away is easy. Building something from wreckage is hard. And I've spent my whole life taking the easy path, covering for my father, avoiding confrontation, staying small so the world wouldn't notice me enough to hurt me. I'm tired of easy. I want to try hard for once." "Hard might kill you." "Easy was killing me slowly. At least hard is honest about the cost." He moved closer, hands hovering near her face like he wasn't sure he had permission to touch. "I don't know how to do this, how to be someone who deserves the choice you're making. I've been a monster so long that being human feels like wearing someone else's skin." "Then we figure it out together. You teach me how to survive in your world. I'll teach you how to be human in it. Maybe between us we'll manage something that doesn't completely destroy everyone we touch." "That's a terrible plan. You got a better one?" His smile was knife-thin and genuine. "Not even a little bit." He kissed her then. Not the clinical forehead brush from the contract ceremony, but something real and desperate and tasting like smoke and survival. She kissed him back, pouring every contradiction into it. The hate she should feel, the fear she was drowning in, the terrible recognition that she'd chosen this, chosen him, chosen to become someone her mother would have wept to see. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. "I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worth this," he whispered. "Good. That's exactly how long it'll take." They stood there in the pre-dawn light, two broken people holding on to each other like shipwreck survivors clinging to the same piece of driftwood, and tried to believe that survival was enough. 3 months later, Boston looked the same but felt different. The Eastern Syndicate was a memory, their territory carved up between Marchese's people and other families who'd waited for weakness like sharks scenting blood. The FBI investigation into the building attack had concluded exactly as Marchese predicted. Syndicate terrorists, brave federal agents, no mention of crime lords jumping between rooftops or wives who'd learned to shoot straight under pressure. Serafina stood in Marchese's downtown office. Legitimate business front, top floor, views of the city that made everything below look like a game board, watching her father testify via video link to a grand jury about cartel operations. He looked older, grayer, diminished by the weight of consequences finally catching up. "He's cooperating well," Marchese said from behind his desk. "Federal prosecutors are quite pleased with the intelligence he's providing. Several arrests already, more coming. You were right to keep him close instead of letting him disappear." "I wasn't being kind. I was being practical." Serafina didn't look away from the screen. "He needs to see what his choices cost. Running away would have let him pretend he was the victim instead of the architect." "You're learning. That's good." Marchese shut off the feed. "Your husband is downstairs, by the way. He brought the quarterly reports you requested." The word husband still felt strange. but less so than it had 3 months ago. The contract had been real enough in legal terms, but somewhere between the gunfights and the revelations, it had become something else. Not quite love. Too much trauma, too many scars. But partnership. Trust built from shared survival. The knowledge that they'd both done terrible things and chosen to keep living anyway. She found Dominic in a conference room, spreadsheets covering the table, looking more like a corporate executive than the crime lord he actually was. Working for Marchese had forced him into a different shape. Less overt violence, more strategic manipulation, wearing suits to meetings where empires were built and destroyed with contracts instead of bullets. "How's the testimony going?" he asked without looking up. "He's telling them everything. Names, dates, financial structures. The cartel's Boston operations will be dismantled within 6 months. And how do you feel about that?" "I don't know, relieved, guilty, both?" She sat across from him. "He's destroying lives to atone for destroying ours. It feels like justice, but tastes like revenge. Welcome to moral ambiguity. Population, everyone in this business." He finally looked up, and the shadows under his eyes were permanent now. Celeste called. "She wants to have dinner tonight. Family dinner," she said. "Like we're normal people with normal problems." "Are we going?" "Do you want to?" Serafina thought about it. About Celeste, who'd forgiven Dominic for doubting her and now ran operations that kept Marchese's empire running smoothly. About Marco, who worked in territory management and hadn't tried to kill anyone in weeks. About her father, who lived 2 floors below them and couldn't meet her eyes in elevators. "Yes, I want to try normal, even if we're terrible at it." They had dinner in a restaurant too expensive for normal people, the kind of place where organized crime figures ate beside politicians and nobody acknowledged the irony. Celeste arrived first, dressed like she was heading to a corporate merger instead of family dinner. Marco came next, looking uncomfortable in civilian clothes, still adjusting to life where he took orders instead of giving them. Her father was last, hovering at the table's edge, like he wasn't sure he was invited. Serafina gestured to the empty chair. He sat, hands folded, and the 6 of them, Dominic, Serafina, Celeste, Marco, her father, and the weight of everything they'd survived, tried to have a conversation that didn't revolve around violence. It was terrible. Awkward silences, stilted small talk, nobody quite sure how to interact without threats or accusations. But somewhere between appetizers and main courses, Celeste made a joke about one of Marchese's rivals, and Marco added a detail that made it funnier. And suddenly they were all laughing, broken, exhausted laughter that had nothing to do with joy and everything to do with the relief of still being alive to laugh at all. "This is deeply dysfunctional," Celeste said, wiping tears. "We're sitting here like a normal family when 3 months ago we were trying to kill each other." "We're adapting," Dominic said. "Isn't that what survivors do?" "Survivors adapt, families forgive." Her father's voice was quiet. "I'm not sure we're capable of either." "Maybe not, but we're here, and nobody's bleeding, and that's more than we had 3 months ago." Serafina raised her glass. "To low bars and lower expectations." They drank to that, and if anyone noticed that half of them were fighting tears, nobody mentioned it. 6 months after the factory confrontation, Serafina stood on the balcony of the apartment she shared with Dominic, watching the city wake up. Sun rising over buildings that held countless secrets, countless survivors, countless people making impossible choices, and calling it Thursday. She'd changed. She saw it in mirrors, harder eyes, steadier hands, the kind of confidence that came from knowing she could survive things that should have destroyed her. She worked for Marchese now, too, handling communications and strategy for operations she didn't ask too many questions about. The money was good. The work was terrible. She did it anyway because the alternative was going back to a life that felt like wearing someone else's clothes. "You're thinking too loud." Dominic emerged onto the balcony, coffee in hand, hair still wet from the shower. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Everything. I was just thinking about who I was 6 months ago." "Miss her?" "Sometimes. She was simpler, smaller, didn't have blood under her fingernails or nightmares about burning buildings." Serafina accepted the coffee he offered. "But she also wasn't strong enough to survive what came next. So I guess I'm grateful she died, even if I mourn who she might have become." "You became someone who saves people while destroying others. That's not nothing." "It's not enough either." "No."
but it's what we have. He pulled her close, and they stood there watching the city together. I talked to Marchese yesterday. He's pleased with our work. Said in another year we might earn enough autonomy to run some operations independently. And then what? We build our own empire? Become the next generation of monsters? Or we use the autonomy to be something different, less violent, more strategic, actually protect people instead of just controlling territory. His voice held something she'd rarely heard, hope, tentative and fragile. It's possible. Unlikely, but possible. You really think we can change this world? I think we can try. That's more than most people in our position manage. The sun continued rising, indifferent to their conversation, and Serafina thought about her mother, the woman who'd died because violence was currency and debts were paid in blood. She thought about the version of herself who'd opened a door at 2:47 a.m. and found her life waiting to be destroyed. She thought about every choice that had led here, to this balcony, with this man, building something that looked like a future from the rubble of countless pasts. I need to tell you something, she said suddenly. Dominic tensed. What? I still don't know if I love you. I know I chose you. I know I trust you more than I trust myself sometimes. I know that when bullets are flying, you're the person I want beside me. But love feels like something that requires more innocence than either of us have left. I know. His voice was gentle. I don't know if I love you either, if we're being honest. I know you're the best thing that's happened to me in 15 years. I know I'd burn this city down before I let anyone hurt you. I know that some mornings I wake up and the first thought I have is gratitude that you're still here, despite everything. But love? He paused. Love feels like something we might grow into eventually, if we survive long enough. So what do we call this? Partnership. Survival. The beginning of something that might become love if we're very careful and very lucky. She thought about it. About the contract that had become real. About the marriage that had started as transaction and transformed into something neither of them had words for. About the fact that she'd stepped between him and a bullet without thinking, that he'd taken one for her without hesitation. That somewhere in the chaos they'd become the kind of partners who understood each other's monsters. I can live with that, she said finally. Yeah, it's honest at least. And honesty's all we've got left. They went inside, got ready for another day of working for Marchese, of managing territory and operations and pretending they were something other than criminals with good intentions. But before they left, Dominic caught her hand. Whatever we become, however this ends, I need you to know something. What? You made me believe redemption was possible. Not easy, not clean, but possible. And that's a gift I didn't know I needed until you gave it to me. Serafina's throat tightened. Don't make me cry before a meeting with Marchese. He'll think you're abusing me and have you killed on principle. Wouldn't want that. His smile was soft, real, the kind of expression she'd rarely seen on his face. Ready to face the world? No, let's go anyway. 1 year after the factory confrontation, Serafina sat in a courtroom watching her father testify in the largest cartel prosecution in Massachusetts history. 12 defendants, hundreds of charges, evidence that would dismantle criminal networks spanning 3 countries. Her father was the star witness, his voice steady as he detailed his own crimes and everyone else's, burning bridges he'd never be able to rebuild. Dominic sat beside her, hand wrapped around hers, and on her other side was Celeste, who'd taken the morning off from running Marchese's Eastern operations to support family. Marco was there too, 3 rows back, no longer comfortable sitting close, but not absent either. They'd become something strange. Not quite family, not quite allies, but people bound together by shared trauma and the understanding that survival meant supporting each other even when forgiveness felt impossible. When the testimony concluded and the jury filed out to deliberate, her father looked back. His eyes found Serafina's across the courtroom, and she saw everything there. Regret, hope, the desperate question of whether this was enough, whether telling the truth could balance out years of lies. She didn't smile, didn't nod, just held his gaze until he looked away, and that felt like its own kind of answer. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed like locusts, cameras flashing, questions shouted. Dominic steered them through with the ease of someone who'd been navigating hostile territory his entire life. They made it to the car, and Celeste drove them away from the circus, while Serafina stared out the window at a city that kept spinning regardless of who won or lost in its courtrooms. "You okay?" Dominic asked quietly. "I don't know. Ask me in 10 years. "Fair enough." They drove to the harbor, to a pier that overlooked the water where cargo ships moved like patient giants, and seagulls screamed their eternal grievances. The three of them stood there, Dominic, Serafina, and Celeste, looking out at the Atlantic like it held answers instead of just endless gray water. "We've been working for Marchese for a year," Celeste said suddenly, "and in that year we've done more good than Dominic's entire previous empire. Food programs, protection for trafficking victims, actually dismantling supply chains instead of just controlling them. It's not redemption, but it's something." "It's pragmatic altruism," Dominic said. "We're still criminals. We've just found more efficient ways to be criminals while minimizing collateral damage." "I'll take it." Serafina wrapped her arms around herself against the harbor wind. "My mother would still hate what we've become, but maybe she'd understand that we're trying to be better than the world that killed her. That's all any of us can do." Celeste checked her phone. "I need to get back. Budget meeting at 3, and Marchese gets cranky when people are late. You two good?" "We're something," Dominic smiled. "Thanks for coming today. That's what family does. Even dysfunctional criminal families who can't decide if they're heroes or villains." She left them there, and Serafina leaned against Dominic while ships moved through water that didn't care about their moral struggles. "I've been thinking," she said. "Dangerous. About the contract. The original agreement said 1 year, marriage dissolved, debt settled. It's been over a year. I know, so technically I could walk away, file for divorce, take whatever settlement Marchese arranged, build a life that doesn't include you or this world or any of the terrible things we've done." Dominic went very still. "Is that what you want?" She thought about it, really thought about it. Not just the automatic response, but the honest answer, buried beneath survival instinct and trauma bonding, and all the other things therapists would probably say were clouding her judgment. "No," she said finally. "I don't want to walk away. I want to stay and keep building whatever this is. Not because the contract says so, not because I'm trapped, but because I'm choosing it, choosing you, choosing us, however broken and complicated that is." His breath came out in a rush. "You're sure?" "I'm terrified, but yeah, I'm sure." "We should probably make it official then. Actual vows instead of a contract. Actual choice instead of coercion." "Are you proposing? Because if so, that's the least romantic proposal in history." "I'm saying that if you're staying, I want it to be real. All of it. Not a transaction, but a partnership. Not surviving together, but building something that might actually last." He turned to face her fully. "So yes, I'm proposing. Marry me again, Serafina. For real this time. With witnesses who aren't lawyers and vows that aren't legal templates. Because I love you." The words hit her like bullets, sharp and unexpected. "You love me?" "Apparently. Took me a year to figure out what this feeling was, but yeah, I love you. You're terrifying and brave, and you make me want to be better than the monster I've spent 15 years becoming. So marry me. Again. Properly." She kissed him instead of answering, pouring everything into it. The fear, the hope, the desperate certainty that this was either the smartest or stupidest decision she'd ever make. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she smiled. "Yes, but we're doing it right this time. No contracts, no coercion, just us, choosing each other despite everything that says we shouldn't." Deal. They stood on the pier watching ships come and go, two people who'd survived things that should have destroyed them, planning a future that defied every logical outcome. The city stretched out behind them, violent, beautiful, broken, home. And somewhere in that tangle of streets and secrets, other survivors were making similar choices, building lives from wreckage, becoming people their past selves wouldn't recognize. The ceremony happened 6 weeks later in a small venue overlooking the harbor, with fewer than 30 guests, Celeste and Marco, her father sitting in the back row trying not to cry. Marchese in attendance because even crime lords appreciated romance, apparently, and various people from their new life who'd earned the right to witness this through blood and loyalty. Serafina wore ivory instead of white, felt more honest somehow, less pretense of innocence neither of them could claim. Dominic wore the same expression he'd worn in the factory when she'd stepped between him and Marco's gun, wonder and terror and desperate hope all mixed together.
The officiant, a retired judge Marchese had on retainer for situations exactly like this, asked if they came freely, without coercion, to pledge themselves to each other. They both said yes, and this time it tasted like choice instead of survival. Do you, Dominic, take Serafina to be your wife? In this life you've built from ashes, promising to be her partner in whatever comes next? I do. With everything I am and everything I'm trying to become.
And do you, Serafina, take Dominic to be your husband, knowing everything he's done, everything you've both become, choosing him anyway?
She looked at him, this man who'd killed her mother, married her under duress, taken bullets for her and taught her to do the same, who'd become the person she trusted most in a world designed to destroy trust. She thought about the girl she'd been a year ago, small and scared, and trying to save a father who'd never deserved saving. She thought about the woman she'd become, harder, sharper, capable of terrible things, and trying to do better anyway. I do. Not despite everything, but because of it. Because we survived and chose to keep surviving together. The rings they exchanged weren't the contract gold from a year ago. These were platinum, engraved with coordinates, the pier where they'd stood planning this future, a physical reminder that they'd chosen to anchor themselves to each other instead of drifting apart. Then by the power vested in me by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and several criminal enterprises that shall remain nameless, I pronounce you married. Again. For real this time. You may kiss each other like you mean it. They did. And this time, when Dominic's lips met hers, it tasted like promise instead of transaction, like the beginning of something instead of the end of everything, like maybe, just maybe, they'd figured out how to build redemption from the ruins of catastrophe. The reception was small, intimate, the kind of gathering where everyone had scars and nobody pretended they didn't. Her father approached during dinner, hovering at a distance until she nodded permission for him to speak. You look beautiful, he said quietly. Your mother would have... He stopped, swallowed hard. I don't know what she would have said. Probably that I destroyed you and you still turned out stronger than both of us combined. She would have hated this. All of it. Serafina's voice was steady. But I think she would have understood that I'm trying to survive in the world that killed her, and sometimes survival means becoming someone she wouldn't recognize. Are you happy? The question hung between them, complicated and impossible. Was she happy? She'd killed people, burned buildings, become complicit in crimes that would put her in prison for life if anyone could prove them. She'd married a man who'd ordered her mother's death. She worked for a crime lord and called it progress. But she'd also saved lives, protected people who had nobody else, built something from nothing with someone who understood her monsters because he had matching ones. She woke up most mornings grateful to be alive instead of wishing she wasn't. That wasn't happiness exactly, but it was something. I'm surviving, she said finally. And some days surviving feels close enough to happy that I can pretend there's no difference. Her father nodded, understanding in his eyes. That's more than I deserve from you. Thank you for letting me be here, for not sending me away, for making me face what I did instead of hiding from it. Don't thank me. I wasn't being kind, I was being practical. I know, but I'm grateful anyway. He moved to leave, paused. For what it's worth, you're stronger than both your mother and I combined. Whatever else I destroyed, I didn't destroy that. He walked away and Serafina watched him go while Dominic's hand found hers under the table. You good? He asked quietly. Getting there. Ask me again in another year. I'll ask you every year for the rest of our lives if that's what it takes. Deal. They danced later. Not well. Both of them too scarred and exhausted for grace, but they moved together like they'd been doing it for decades instead of months. Celeste cut in eventually, stealing Serafina for a dance while Dominic was commandeered by Marchese for what looked like a business discussion disguised as celebration. You really did it, Celeste said, spinning them across the floor. Married my brother twice, survived a war, became someone who scares people while feeding them. I'm impressed. I'm terrified. Good. Terror keeps you sharp. Complacency gets you killed. She grinned. For what it's worth, you're the best thing that's happened to him in 15 years. Don't tell him I said that. His ego's already insufferable. Your secret's safe with me. Good. Because if you hurt him, I'll kill you. But if he hurts you, I'll kill him. Fair warning. Fair enough. They danced until the music slowed, until guests started drifting away, until it was just close family and the kind of comfortable exhaustion that came from surviving another milestone. Marchese approached as they were leaving, handed Serafina an envelope. "Wedding present," he said. "Don't open it now. Wait until you're alone, then decide what you want to do with it." "What is it?" "Information about your mother's death, the full investigation, everything that happened that night. I had my people dig deeper than the original reports." His eyes were unreadable. "Whether you use it or burn it is your choice, but you deserve to know the complete truth." He left before she could respond, and the envelope felt heavy as guilt in her hands. Back in their apartment, no longer a safe house, but an actual home, with furniture they'd chosen, and photos on walls, and evidence of lives being lived instead of just survived, Serafina stared at the envelope while Dominic poured whiskey. "You going to open it?" he asked. "I don't know. Part of me wants the whole truth. Part of me thinks we have enough truth already. Whatever you decide, I'm here." She thought about it. About her mother, about the woman she'd barely known, about 16 years of grief and 1 year of revelation, about the fact that knowing more details might change everything or nothing, might bring closure or open wounds that would never heal. Finally, she walked to the fireplace, held the envelope over flames that danced like living things, and let go. It burned fast, truth turning to ash, and when nothing remained except smoke and the smell of paper consumed, she turned back to Dominic. "No more secrets, no more revelations. Whatever happened that night stays in the past where it belongs. We move forward, not back." "You sure?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." He pulled her close, and they stood there in their home, watching ashes drift up the chimney while the city hummed beyond their windows. Violent, beautiful, broken, theirs. "What comes next?" she asked. "Tomorrow we work for Marchese. Next month we figure out how to do more good than harm. Next year we see if we're still standing." He kissed the top of her head. "After that, we improvise." "That's a terrible plan." "It's the only one we've got." She laughed. Real laughter this time, not the desperate kind from the early days, but something that felt almost like joy. "Then I guess we're committed to terrible plans and improvisation. Could be worse. Could be dead." "That too." They moved to the balcony, looking out at the city that had tried to destroy them and failed. And Serafina thought about beginnings and endings and the strange space between where most people actually lived. They weren't heroes. They'd never be heroes. Had too much blood on their hands, too many crimes stacked up behind them, too many terrible decisions made in the name of survival. But they were alive. They were together. They were building something that looked like redemption from a distance, even if up close it was still just criminals trying to be less terrible. And maybe that was enough. Maybe surviving and choosing to survive better was the only kind of happy ending people like them ever got. Maybe the real victory wasn't defeating the monsters, but learning to be human despite them. The sun set over Boston, painting the sky in colors that looked like fire and promise, and Serafina stood beside her husband, chosen freely this time, loved imperfectly, but honestly, and watched the darkness come without fear. They'd survived the night once. They could do it again, and again, and again. For as long as it took to build lives worth surviving for instead of just surviving through. That was the promise they'd made to each other, standing in a factory with death at their backs and impossible choices ahead. That was the promise they kept, day by day, mistake by mistake, building redemption from wreckage one breath at a time. That was how the story ended. Not with triumph or tragedy, but with two broken people choosing each other despite every rational reason not to, and calling it love because they didn't have a better word for what they'd become. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't clean, but it was theirs. And in a world designed to destroy people like them, that was victory enough.